All right. I'm so happy to welcome to the program. We have a new guest with us here today. We have Nicholas Polimenakos with us. Thanks for joining me, Nicholas.
Thank you, Melissa. And you got my name dialed in. It's a
We worked on
challenge.
it.
We worked on it, but it didn't take long. So yes, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me on. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So what I'm excited to have Nicholas on the program here today to talk about Libra Equinox season 2022. Fall. It's already here. What? Where's this year going? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I'm staying in Portland, Oregon these days, and the summers are warm and stuff, and I'm just not quite done
Mm.
with it yet. I don't want to, and then, but in general, I'm a big fan of fall in general, and because of things are so visually in front of you with change.
Yeah.
So, if you're living in the part of the world that you have the trees and the leaves falling and the wind blowing through and the clouds moving fast, I appreciate that. But just give me a couple more days of heat. So,
Just before we turn over here. Well, you know what?
yeah,
These climate these days, you might just get that. Who
yeah,
knows?
that's totally
We
true.
really don't know.
Yeah, totally.
So we're going to talk all about the fall season. Of course, it's fall if you're in the northern hemisphere. I know we have some listeners in
Mhm,
the southern, so
mhm,
happy spring coming.
mhm,
There, which always blows my mind, to be honest.
mhm.
But we're going to talk about the equinox. We're going to talk about Libra season as a whole. We know Libra season is definitely leading us into some big astrology that is coming later in the year. But before we get started here, because Nicholas is new to the program, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, let the listeners know who Nicholas is.
Well, Nicholas, that's me, is
Oh,
first and foremost a human being on this planet. I will say that, which means I am faulty and I'm
Mm,
proud of it. And I will let the listeners know one part of my chart. I am a Gemini, and I've been in the Pacific Northwest for a while, and I've been studying astrology. I'm going to date myself here, but it's got to be 25 plus years. I've been on the professional angle for at least 2008, 2009, and I love it, and I love helping people one on one. I also have had a foot in the astrology community itself with conferences and other interesting things, organizations. I just got done helping put on the ESAR conference that was outside of Denver. Just got done doing that. It was a year of work in the making, and it was good to see everybody, all our colleagues, so on and so forth. And I also have my own YouTube channel, Sparkles of Gold Astrology, and a podcast that I started this year too, called the Sparkles of Gold Astrology Manifesto.
oh,
Yes,
manifesto.
I just had to. I just had to do it. I just had to do the manifesto part. I even use font. I even use font on the artwork that just kind of looked like it was graffiti, like spray painted on a wall somewhere. So yeah, but that's me. And yeah, that's my brief info background.
Love it. And
Mhm.
if you've been to a few conferences, especially Norwalk, you might have
Yeah.
caught Nicholas in of all places. Where would you find the Gemini? In the bookstore.
That's right. I forgot to say that. Thank you. Actually, yeah, because my history there with Norwalk was been helping out on many different levels, and for years it was working in the bookstore there and helping with the audio recordings. That Greg Nalbandian runs the audio recordings in the bookstore. Him and Patrick Carrick, I've worked with them in the bookstore for years, and small and big conferences, but at Norwalk, and love that part of the astrology world, astrology books and literature, and I've learned a little bit over the years, and so I'm pretty good at guiding people. Like, tell me what you're into, and I, like, in Hermes fashion, point them where to go, and so yeah, thanks for reminding me of that, Melissa.
Yeah, well, when you got once again when you're Gemini and you got your hand in so many cookie jars,
Yeah,
you might forget the ones that's
no, fully, yeah.
but I think that's the first place I ever saw Nicholas was was in the bookstore there. And that is very helpful because there are a lot of astrology books out there. And I know, I mean, I walked in and was so overwhelmed of like, oh, well, what do I need? What should I gravitate to? Like, so to have Hermes just sitting there, knowledgeable, knowing where to guide you is very valuable. So
Yeah,
yeah.
agreed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's good that we have Hermes with us here today too, because we got a lot to talk about, a lot to navigate through. And so yeah, we're moving into Libra season. This is our bi-yearly equinox. Libra Ingress is going to happen on Thursday, September 22nd, which I think this podcast will air maybe like a day before that. So you're probably listening to it around the equinox if you're in there right away and you get this podcast right when it releases. But this is equal day, equal night with the equinox, and with Libra season, which is cardinal air, we have a focus, at least a solar focus, coming onto Venus there. So that's some big news with the Libra ingress. We also are going to have a new moon in Libra, which is going to be opposite Jupiter retrograde. So I think that is another interesting lunation to talk about, and has kind of a background in some of the lunations that have come before, especially in June and July there. We have a full moon in Aries, which is always a party, with a slow Mars squaring Neptune. So we'll be talking about that. We have cardinal cardinal quarters. And so life really tends to move along when we have cardinal energy pushing us forth.
Mhm.
We got 3 stations. We got Mercury going to station direct, Saturn and Pluto all stationing direct.
Mhm.
And we start Libra season on a Sun cazimi with Mercury, and we end it with a Venus cazimi on the Sun. So, wow, what a month. So, I mean, Nicholas, where do you want to start? Do you want to talk a little bit about just the equinox in general? The
Yeah,
lunar
we could start
equinox?
there.
What do you have to say?
One thing that's, just right there, I think, with us while we're doing this recording is, what's happened in the last 24 hours with a Mercury Jupiter opposition. And,
Yeah.
in a sense, it's a chapter in the story, because you mentioned we have new and full moons. Jupiter is involved in a lot of this. So to give those listening and watching, like, I like to look at things as a story in an opera,
Yeah.
and with transits, and sometimes we hear about important transits that happens on this day or this week, but there's always chapters before and after. And I like to talk about those chapters because it gives you a sense of like you're in the story, and that one part of the story doesn't make up the whole thing. And
Mhm.
it's something, if you can understand and look at things that way, then you could feel that you're a part of the story and part of the changes. Like, oh, I remember last week or this time when Mercury and Jupiter had their opposition, and what was happening with communication and Jupiter influencing that, and the big ideas, so on and so forth. And maybe they weren't flowing. But here, when we get to the next chapter, let's say with however Jupiter's involved, you can tie it in to the aspect before. So just want to say that out loud. And when we're looking at the just in general with a seasonal change
Yeah.
and it being cardinal, I think there's this out, at least in the northern hemisphere, there's this outwardness that happens because of summer, and a pushing out into the world, put an expression, and so on and so forth. And you find yourself doing that by yourself, or you're doing it with others. You get to the mutable sign here, summer is ending with Virgo. There's that transitional point of you're still kind of outward there, but you start to look within.
Mhm.
And when you get to something like the equinox, you kind of have the recap that happens with yourself within, and then you take that somewhere else. And where do you take that? You get to a place with Venus and Libra, and you start to relate to others about it. And maybe you get to hear about their recap, and that's the way I kind of look at it. I look at it in that sense. And when Venus comes in and you're about to share something, you're about to have a conversation, and so on and so forth. And speaking of, conversations, we've had a precursor, a chapter here before the equinox, and it is the Mercury retrograde, and it is Mercury being in Libra right now. So we've already had some Libra to guide us through here, to introduce this equinox. and the sharing of what's happened pretty much the last 3 months. So that's one way I think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Mercury is definitely telling a story here. Mercury has foreshadowed quite a bit of Libra, more than I would have liked, to be honest. But
Yeah.
this is coming from a 12th house Libra place in my chart. But I think you're absolutely right about the idea of chapters, and especially, I mean, this is a unique year. I mean, I'm like, this is a unique year. Actually, the last 3 years have been unique years, but playing into the whole the Mercury piece that we're in right now, and of course Jupiter is still in Aries, which, you know, Jupiter in Aries, this is a big chapter change just in general for everyone. You know, you hang out, you know, the planet of forward momentum and growth hangs out in the first sign in this initiatory energy, of course, and just giving us precursors, right? You know, because it's going to do its main thrust through Aries next winter and spring here. But there are a lot of chapters that are turning all over the place. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
all in the client work, all my friends, you know, I'm just watching it. And the Mercury Jupiter opposition that is currently underway and will have its third pass actually during Libra season, once Mercury stations direct and goes back into Libra, is really a lot of I don't want to say foreshadowing, because it's not, I mean, it is foreshadowing. There's a lot of energy that's going to go in with that Mercury action into Mars retrograding, which is going to happen in Scorpio season. But Libra is kind of this in-between point, which makes so much sense for Libra just in general, right? I mean, it's the sign of balance and this kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
where's this going? What's out of whack here? What needs more? What needs less? What's fair? What's not? You know, it's this kind of like dance that comes in with the seasons. And what better time for that when we are changing pace and we're shifting these chapters? We're just, it's like an interesting feeling it out, which feels very Venusian to me. I mean, we think of feeling being like maybe the more the moon, but you know, there's a
Yeah.
receptive state that comes
Yeah,
with
it's a
it.
receptive state, and it's that, I think, then inherent state to want to harmonize,
Yeah.
you know, especially when you're coming from a mutable sign, Virgo, or it's mutable signs always end the season. So then you're coming into the cardinal, and then you're wanting to find some harmonization. That's what Venus is in the end. However it's done, whether it flows or not, it's for manipulative reasons. Because let's be real here, sometimes with Venus and Libra, there is that game, there's that chess game, the politics of
Mm.
relationships, that type of thing. But to take a step back, you know, just the inherent feeling of like wanting to harmonize, and not only that, at times it's you and the world, you and whatever's outside of you, and feeling that out, and understanding. And then a lot of times, can't help it, being human, it's incorporating other people, other human beings.
They're there.
Yeah, they're there. And so it's like, how do you and I, like right now, doing this podcast, this show, you know, how we're finding our way with each other here right now, and feeling each other like, hey, what do you think? Or what do you think? How do you feel about this? By the way, here's a glass of wine. What you know, and I'm saying this sort of a joke, but I'm actually is a tool. Because if we're in a current Mercury and Libra retrograde, and we have this equinox happening, and Venus is there behind it all, we're talking about what Venus wants to do, and it's harmonize. Find the tools to help you harmonize. You know, sometimes the glass of wine does help. You know, and sometimes if you're lucky enough, I'm looking in the background here, I'm seeing the stereo equipment. I know you have a turntable back there somewhere. I just got one in the mail today. Why did I order a turntable? This is the reason. I needed to hear the scratches of the needle hitting the vinyl, because to me, before the music starts, I'm just in that moment, I'm starting to take myself somewhere.
Mm.
So just as Venus has her way, when it's not just with words, it's what Venus does with their senses. and how they apply that and how you do that and how you do that with other people. And I again, it's important to talk about this in the most simplistic way, I think, because things can get super complicated in our lives, emotional. We got these stories and the transits, but you know what you can do as a person, as a human being, the power that you have with yourself and other people. And if you're using Venus as a vessel, is to run through your senses. And then you have it in Equinox in Libra. It's not just like the Venus and Taurus were sitting in the backyard smoking a joint and eating too many brownies. It's not necessarily like that. There's something else to it. There's something else because of it being an air sign that the mind comes into play. And with Mercury and Libra right now in retrograde, even though retrograde, this is a major focal point. So still, I think you can use your senses to hone down conversation, to corral things up, and to go back to how you were talking about this in the beginning, Melissa, of like, hey, what about this? Or what about this side? Or how we're going to feel this out, you know? And it's not like what the moon is feeling, but there is something that happens through our senses that does hit our heart in the end. And our heart isn't purely, it's not mental.
No,
it's not.
We think it is occasionally.
Yeah, we think it is, but
it's not.
Yeah, that's that word, think.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we think it is, but well, and it's such an interesting thing too, having Mercury, and this is playing out in the equinox. We're going to take a look at the equinox chart here in a second for Washington, D.C. But one of the things that's interesting as we start Libra season, right? Because Venus is going to be on the coattails of the sun very soon, because as I mentioned in the kind of the outline as we started, Libra season is going to end with a Sun Venus conjunction. So Venus is actually starting out this this whole transit in Virgo, which we know by dignity, you know, Venus is a little, it gets heady there, right? Because that's the idea of Venus. You know, Venus, as you said, is a very sensual. She kind of like feels things out, touches it, tastes it. And in a Mercury sign and in an Earth based Mercury sign, there's more of a practicality there. There's more of an intellectualization when it comes to just working with other people, romance, you know, anything has to do with Venus and Mercury both. But when you're talking about like coming together with what's outside of you, and especially in this moment as we get to Libra season, the first word that came to my mind was humility. Because I feel, because we're all going through all these things right now, and there's, you know, I have not talked to one person that hasn't said in the last week or two that life is just throwing them things that are just like, what? Yeah, what is going on? And I feel like Venus is giving I feel like tapping into the Venus harmony action actually can come from a place of maybe humility right now. Just that Virgo side.
Yeah, totally. I get it. You know, it's interesting too, because we just came out of these just two, as a chapter that just happened here with Venus in Virgo and Mars and Gemini squaring off of each other in the last week. Both those current situations in the end are ruled by Mercury and Libra. So I think I find it interesting, Melissa, that you brought up humility here, and it can be looked upon in different ways, but there is a groundedness. There's a way to be grounded with humility, and there is a way to take in something. We're not talking about shame and guilt.
Yeah,
that like the other things that can happen in the Virgo archetype story. But there is something to humility and a groundedness to it all, and a certain type of reality involved. And, you know, and that in Mars and Gemini being Mercury, you can computate that or express that through words. But I still think in the end that you want to get beyond the words. You can get stuck there too.
That's true.
A lot of heady energy going on here. But again, back to what you're saying, we're kind of in this place where Venus is in Virgo not right now, but we know very soon here, Venus is coming home, you know? So just to keep that in mind as a beacon of light.
Yeah, we're gonna be laying out the welcome wagon for her. She's because
Yeah,
she's been through so much all year. It's like poor
yeah,
Venus. Venus is just getting worked.
yeah, totally. Yep. I agree with you. You know what? I think that's again a great point. If I were it for me as an astrologer, think about there's the important transits of the year, so on and so forth. For me personally, it's the eclipses. And so that's for another conversation. But the reason why I'm saying that is because the North and South Node currently, North Node being in Taurus, ruled by Venus, South Node in Scorpio ruled by Mars. So wherever Venus and Mars are going to be the whole year, whenever these eclipses are, they're the focal points in the end.
Yeah.
And what is Venus and Mars? In the end, it's always a relational thing, how you stand with yourself or with the other, so on and so forth. So this world has been spinning on relationship soap opera and drama since the beginning of time.
I know.
So anyway, humility is
Yeah.
good though. I'm a believer in a healthy way of humility, but then it has to go somewhere. And so, like you said, the welcome mat, bring it on. Venus and Libra, you know, and we're going to take things to another level. So
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
yeah.
I try to look forward to anything though. I mean, there's always something to something to glean from whatever we are encountering. So, but it will be nice when she gets there.
Yeah.
So let's see, is there any other thing I gotta say before? No, I think we kind of wrapped up our seasonal overview. So let me go ahead and share my screen if you're watching the video. We're gonna take a look at the Ingress chart set for September 22nd, 2022, 9:03 p.m. Washington, D.C. So now, Nicholas, I don't know if you're into mundane or politics or world affairs or anything like that, but
A little bit.
I know, me too. I try not to obsess over it, but I do have to say I find it fascinating. And I know we're not going to really talk about eclipses here today, but we're kind of going to talk about eclipses a little bit because we're headed towards them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're going to encounter in Libra season, because the solar eclipse that happens at 2 degrees of Scorpio, like we're
Yeah.
going to feel all that. Libra season is really wrapped up in it. And like you said, right, Libra season and Aries and Taurus seasons and Libra and Scorpio seasons are our 2 back-to-back times of year where we really experience the Venus Mars exchange,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that it would do us a good service to at least allude to the eclipses a little bit by the time the next episode comes out and the eclipse is already there and they're like, I needed to know. No, but
yeah. But
so
we're
yeah.
setting up the story though, basically. We're setting up in the eclipse stories here pretty much with the equinox and the end of September and October. It's just a huge setup. So yeah.
Well, and I think this, if you're looking at the chart here for Washington, D.C., we have Taurus rising on Uranus and the North Node there. So, I mean, you can't get much more eclipsey for the US than this configuration. We've got the sun in Libra there conjunct that Mercury retrograde, because I think we kind of said this briefly and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but Libra season starts out with the sun Mercury inferior cazimi, that is embedded not only in Libra season, but within the second half of the year itself. We got a moon in Leo, which is interesting because we have another late degree moon that is really not making aspect to much. And
you have that, and if you're saying that, by the way, another late degree moon, because what we've had this year, it's the beginning of the year, the lunations we had with new or full, they were happening in late degree.
Yeah.
Also, you just reminded me of that, by the way, of this late degree happened a lot in the beginning of the year with certain lunations. So just want to point that out,
which is always interesting to me. Yeah, and then we had those late degrees with the full moons, and now we have these new moons at the beginning degrees, which are Fascinating, because once again, to go back to what you were saying with the chapters that turn. I mean,
Yeah.
we can talk a lot about chapters and where the story is when we just look at degrees in themselves. Earlier degrees are going to have a lot more to still still brew and introduce, where last degrees can get very, very pregnant with energy
Yep.
that is ready to change in some way. So that is something to look at. I'm trying to find my I have this whole like mind map that of 2022 that has all
Really?
the
Oh, I
charts
like
and
that.
all the
Mind map.
oh, you would love this.
Yes, I'm all
I'll have to
about it.
I'll have to show you the oh, here I go. I'm like, where is the Aries ingress? Yes. The point I was trying to make this whole entire time
Mhm.
was that the Aries ingress for Washington had a Gemini rising. And so when we have a mutable rising sign, we always want to look at the Libra ingress, because there will be two important charts, mundane speaking, for the year. So this chart is going to essentially pick up where, I
Mhm.
mean, the Aries ingress encompasses the whole year as a whole from Aries to Aries, but for the United States, there is this kind of like pickup chart that is happening right now, and it is a loaded chart. Pluto on the midheaven, when we have we talked about this in the last Mars retrograde episode, we're going to have a lunar eclipse on our voting day. Like, you can you can't make this stuff up.
Of course.
Of course, I know. So, and yeah, the ascendant squaring Saturn there. So, I mean, Nicholas, what pops out to you just right away from this chart?
I'm trying not to bring my personal world into this because I'm looking at this chart and what it does to my own world, like chart, being a Taurus ascendant. But
Mm-hmm.
I just can't help to focus on Sun-Mercury conjunction. And as a guiding light, and the reason why I'm saying this is, and there's those who listen to your podcast, I know, who know astrology. We're at all different levels here, right? But
Yeah,
if you're going to pick a moment during the retrograde, the Mercury retrograde, and this is every Mercury retrograde, in my opinion, where there's the heart of it all, where there's the most clarity you can get. It's pretty much when the Sun and Mercury are together in conjunct like this. So all the so-called mishaps that happen during retrogrades, by the way, I'm not a believer of all mishaps. I think the retrogrades are just such a great time to get things done and to tie up loose things, loose items. So
100%.
I'm a big fan of that. I get a lot done during these Mercury retrogrades, but again, depending, no matter what your chart is and so on and so forth, a Sun Mercury, when Mercury is at the heart, in the sense the Sun is purifying Mercury to its essence, and there you're going to have the cleanest view, the cleanest insights. It's there, and you can look to see where Libra is in your chart, where it's happening there. But if I was pinpointing something in this particular chart, it's that for me. And because it's in the end, for me, when we're talking about this month, I think Mercury, it always comes back to this particular moment with Mercury, because of Mars being in Gemini and what's about to happen with the Mars station, and so on and so forth. So that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, it is a unique setup, I have to say, for especially for an ingress chart that's going to carry us through, next equinox. And having that clarity, especially in Libra, which is interesting because I mean, when I think about Libra, there's a huge sense of justice that lives there to me, right? When we talk about harmony and the equilibrium and balance, 0 degrees, we were just talking about the idea of this introduction of energy with
Mhm.
early degree signs. And I mean, we're looking at this for in terms of the US, whether or not you live in the US or not, obviously. But that's a big thing that's missing here a lot is this sense of balance and fairness. And this is coming up time and time again. For our particular country, and to see Pluto right there at the midheaven you know, power dynamics and power changes and power imbalances, power grabs, power corruption, you know,
Yeah.
like in the ninth house too, and thinking about the court systems and um it's
Yeah, like the law and court systems, what gets decided into like what the ethical parts of things.
yeah,
But now you bring in the Pluto part here, and then we're thinking about it from a political angle for the country more than ever. Well, I won't say more than ever, actually, but it's pretty decisive, isn't it?
yeah.
It's you're here or you're there. And if
It,
you even don't belong to two different factions, you're somehow pulled into one. But this isn't the first time this has happened. This was happening during the Civil War. This is why the Civil War happened. It was a lead up, and this decisiveness. Now, here we are at this point in our country. You would think here with Mercury, Sun, there is clarity there, but bringing in the Pluto story here of laws and ethics, that type of thing with the court, there's a negotiation here. The first thing that comes to my mind is a possible negotiation. It doesn't mean that everyone gets what they want or what quote unquote justice is and what it means. What it means for you and I, it can mean something completely different for someone else, whatever political views that they have of what justice means. So, but we do know that's on the table, that word. But the other part of it, I think here, and what this is a setup for is like pure negotiation. And who better to do something like that? With Mercury and Libra, then you're going to have Pluto. So it's no joke what's about to be said. The words, can the words be the words as vessels? Are they come across as like, oh, I feel like you're listening to me. Now, that's one thing. Instead of like, I'm screaming at you and no, I'm right, and so on and so forth. I think with something like this is like people like they'll at least portray that they're listening to each
listening.
other.
They'll put on
Like
the facade, like
yeah, they'll put on the facade. They put the
the
little penis shell on there, like, oh, okay, yeah, I heard what you said. Now are they agreeing to anything? Are they still on extreme sides? Yes, but I think when it comes to politics and let's say rule of law and things like that, that's always been a negotiation. Whether it happens in the Supreme Court level or it happens in the legislative end, there's always banter back and forth, and there's always the weighing out and so on and so forth. That's just part of what our country is.
and that doesn't mean we actually get somewhere either,
Yeah,
because I mean
doesn't
that's
mean
that's the thing, is like just because it's there.
yeah,
Yeah,
stalemate. Then you could find yourself like still like, oh, I listen to you, listen to me, and then but still like no one's budging.
but who's yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it feels like there's going to be pressure to have some sort of, just with Pluto on the midheaven there, but being essentially the point of leadership. And then having, the people represented by the ascendant there, or the land, also the moon, in Leo, the ascendant right on Uranus and North Node. I think people are going, this is a volatile combination, as far as like, wake it up, what are we doing,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think part of this too, when you bring up the ascendant here and Taurus, and in the sense of we think in basic terms of Taurus with resources, and in the
Yes.
sense of like what it is, it's always connected to money and coins and
Yeah.
cryptocurrency, by the way, all those types of things. We're in an interesting point right now because of the inflationary stuff that's happening. And I've been seeing massive layoffs in the last 2 to 3 weeks, even the tech world. I'm not talking about like the auto industry and stuff too. I'm talking about the tech world. Patreon just shaved 20% of its workforce. A bunch of other tech companies have been doing it. And so even on that angle, I almost feel like that on a corporate level, that other corporate boards see what's happening and they've been waiting for this, and they've been waiting to shave off employees, because in the end, it's in this country and the way it's run, the number one thing in the end is always profit at all costs. So, if you think about it from an objective point of view, from the corporate end, they'll do anything to keep the profit going. You shave 20% of your workforce, it's a headline in the news. It sucks for the people getting laid off. But in the end, shareholders or whoever's on the board, if it's private companies, they're still making their cash. They're still making their dough. And this, I think, is at the heart of our country, in a sense. For me, it's a class issue, always, in the end, because it's the thing about, like, who makes the money for whom, or who does the work for whom. And I think here, with a chart like this, when you have certain things happening in laws, and we're not talking about just civil rights here, we're talking about worker rights. We have more than ever, you see people trying to start unions at Starbucks and Amazon. They just bypassed a railroad strike here so many days ago, but that's not going away. That is not going away. So basically, resources, who controls the resources, and then to bring in Pluto in here, what you said about law and stuff, what happens on the legislative end, and what's been happening for years here of laws being changed, lobbyists, so on and so forth, and how they create control for the corporations to do whatever they want to do. Now, if everyone's listening to what I'm saying here, you can kind of see where I stand a little bit with things. But in the end, regardless of what party you belong to, if you belong to a party, in the end, resources and basic survival is really on the table right now. And I think it was really exposed because of COVID. And I think you see fundamental breakdowns happening in the workforce area, or just how people living. And then now you have inflation, the cost of gas. I just went to go buy something at the store the other day. It just all of a sudden was $2 extra. And that's me. And you have to imagine, it doesn't matter what party you are after that. People are going to the store and they're going to buy things, and everything's expensive. And so I think that's a pressure cooker. And I think that is not going away. The layoffs, the inflation, and just how tight money is.
Well, I think the term you just used was on point. Fundamental breakdown. If that's not Uranus on the ascendant in Taurus,
totally.
I really don't know what is fundamental breakdown. Like, it's, and to think about, that's once again come back to the Sun-Mercury cazimi in the 6th house there, at least by whole sign. This is the workforce. These are labor. This is healthcare. And that Sun Mercury is ruled by that debilitated Venus in Virgo that we're talking about, which I don't think, I think the whole issue, women's rights issue, and, the Venus being in the 5th house, and the forced childbirth, things along those lines. This is going to be a big topic. It already is, but I think it's going to continue here, along with the labor unions, the just resources in general. Like you're talking about the people that were fighting for healthcare and in the train industry. And they're like, no, we don't want to give you this extra, and we'll shut down the resources for the whole country, because we don't want to give you something that is like a basic human right, to at least in my mind. And it's interesting because part of this chart too we have we got Venus there.
I'm seeing Neptune, Venus, Neptune.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're seeing Venus, Neptune, and you're also seeing Venus, Pluto, but not quite to Pluto yet, right? Because Venus is essentially moving energy from a trine to Uranus to this Neptune. And then we'll eventually make it to Pluto. But another thing going on too is we have this Mars in the 2nd house of, the country's resources and financial systems. It's trining Saturn up there in the 10th too. So that's interesting to think about too. And just kind of like the corporate law, the people that are in charge, this strong Saturn constriction presence over, in Aquarius, over the populace as a whole. And Mars is just known for taking and slashing. And, which is in the 2nd house, that's kind of like playing into what you were just talking about.
If I'm correct, I know someone out there is going to know or whatever, but I think one of the USA charts, I could be the Sibley chart, whatever. I think I don't know. Does it have a Mars in Gemini or Venus in Gemini?
Oh yeah, we were just talking about it. It's Mars. It has Mars in Gemini at 21 degrees, squaring Neptune at 22. And so, actually, that's interesting. I like that you bring that up, because Venus in this chart is exactly conjunct the US's Neptune by degree. So, which Neptune dissolves, Neptune diffuses, Neptune has deception. It can paint a picture that is not quite clear or can erode or wash away. It can also bring in, charitable situations too, where we see a lot of support coming. Like I just saw a thing in the news about a sex trafficking victim, Piper, her name, her name's escaping me right now, and she had stabbed a man to death for her life. Basically, she was in a very bad situation, and then the
Yeah.
court's like, well, we'll give you probation for that, but you're gonna have to pay $150,000 in restitution to this
Mhm.
person's family. And I'm like, oh God. But a GoFundMe is now up to $550,000 for Piper. And so it's interesting to what the people, right? Because this is a Taurus ruled chart, and the ascendant there, it's like the people can rally together
Yeah, the
to help give
resources.
the
The
resources.
resources, yeah.
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 And so, I'm getting chills when I say that. So it's like, it's almost like we can't rely, people have been saying this whole time, we can't rely on big government. They're not going to take care of it. We gotta
Yeah.
work together, and move that around. Anyways,
What
that's
you
where my
just
brain was
said,
going.
I have to say something. What you just said, we can't rely on big government. You know what? You'll hear that from the leftist point of view.
Yeah.
You'll hear the same thing from like the far right,
Yeah.
which is fascinating to me. So there's something, and there's something happening with the connection and view of government and what it is. Depending on what your philosophy is, there's something that's not flowing in general. One more thing I want to say to this, because I think it's really important. Venus rules the ascendant here in this chart, Taurus. It's ruling this Sun, Mercury in Libra. Venus in the fifth house, so on and so forth. In the end, and this is I hope this makes sense for people listening. There's the resource end of things. And then you gave an example of a collaborative, community-based coming together for this GoFundMe. But you've seen this on, I know people have seen it in their local world during COVID because people had to watch each other's backs. They had to come up and deal with whatever it is. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't get this. You couldn't get that. You helped your neighbor. Hopefully you did. Hopefully your neighbor helped you. Some of us, or some people, haven't had that happen to them, and they've been alone, alienated. And this is a major thing that's going on here, because in the end, it's about connecting, relating with Venus, whether you're doing it with your mind, with resources, and in the end, your heart, or you use other vessels as an expression from your heart to help other people. And I believe something like a Uranus and Taurus transit that's happening is, Uranus bringing something new or to shake up foundations. Yes. But in my mind, that transit actually, what is new is actually what's always been around in the end of what humans can do when they look at each other face to face, and they come from their hearts, and they go beyond the politics, and they realize and see the essence in each other as human beings. And then what you do when you're in that place, the actions that you take from that place, it gets really simple, and you do use your senses through that place. It goes beyond the phone, and it goes beyond the computer, and it goes beyond the news feed. It just gets back to basic human relating. And, for me, a Uranus and Taurus transit, what is the new? The new actually has been the very, very old, actually. So for people listening, the hard transit, so on and so forth, it's really hard. And you got your personal life, and then you got to take care of your family, you're struggling, and then there's things happening on the mundane level, and then the huge world level. But remember, the best thing you have going for you, your power, is that way you look at yourself, how you relate to yourself, the love that you give yourself, and what stems from that when you do look outside yourself, whether it's your family, your loved one, the neighbors. You have the ultimate power of the universe of just basic relating, basic acknowledgement. And what comes from there is, hey, I just grew some cucumbers here. Share it. I have these pumpkins. I know it sounds funny, but it's like these little basic things, they're the most powerful things. And in the end, on a collective level, this is going to play itself out, because when we get to the bigger politics of things, when you have people relating to each other on that level, on that organic level, it just creates the basis and the foundation for something new. So I just went on a rant there.
No, I love that.
Yeah,
I Well,
Yeah.
it makes power less divisive when we're able to
Mhm.
connect with each other through, I guess we could just say goodwill,
Yeah.
and I mean, I'm looking at and that's actually what if I'm going to pick out something that I like about Venus opposing Neptune, I think that's what it is. And I immediately in my mind, I went to my buy nothing group, my
Yeah.
Facebook group for my community and buy nothing, and we're just trading, and I have this, who needs this, I can use
Mhm.
that, and it's just this, and like you said, it's just on a very base level, right? It's like we're talking, it's very Venus and Virgo, right? I have this extra butter dish. Who can use this?
Yeah.
Do you need a butter dish? Do you need extra laundry detergent?
Yeah, I hit you up. I'm
Etc.
like, I don't have my measuring cups. Like, I don't have any. Do you have a so and so measuring
Yeah,
cup?
ask. I need
Uh,
a 16-ounce measuring cup. Like, I mean,
yeah.
it's a very basic thing. And it's interesting because it's someone in need, right? I
Mhm.
mean, Venus in Virgo and that Neptune connection, to me, it brings up needy people. But not necessarily a bad way, but we all have needs. We all, that's what we're here for. Right?
Yeah.
Like we're here to help other people. I mean, any good Virgo planet will tell you that. Uh, but
Yeah.
we're here to help. So I think that's going to be a big component of it. I mean, the last thing I say about this chart, because we have a lot to talk
Yeah.
about, but I mean, we really haven't touched on the moon at all, and thinking about this moon at one of the, because the Aries Ingress chart had the moon at 29 degrees of Libra, ironically, where we're going, or not
Mhm.
ironically, where we're going to have the Sun Libra conjunction here at the end of this season. But it is interesting to think that, I mean, what's the moon doing here? The last thing it made was an opposition to Saturn. The next thing it does, I think, is nothing for a while, actually, just by, yeah, it's a very interesting moon. So it doesn't have a lot of power per se, and it's in Leo, so it has to look back to that Sun-Mercury
Yeah.
conjunction. That's all coming back to basically Mercury and Venus being in a mutual reception, that can't see each other. But the moon is interesting. I mean, it's Leo. It's going to put us in our own needs. Like it's a very personalized position, right? I
See
mean,
me,
Leo is,
pet
yeah,
me.
I know.
See
Pet
me,
me.
pet me. Like, you know what I mean? And or let me share with you. Can you, the feel that warmth? I can't believe I'm such a cynical guy as of like the last 20 years, but I can't believe I'm talking in terms of like, oh, it's the positive, the expression and the sharing of things and the sharing of resources too, in a sense of like what has been created or what is comes from our hearts, what we create from within. Can the country do this? Can the country show themselves that, show each other that?
I
Or is
know.
it? Is it? And this is not to bag on any Leos out there or people who have Leo moons, because I know a bunch of you, but I'm not saying you're like this. But the other part of this could be like, hey, like it's all about me, there is
It's true.
nobody else, you know. And it's just, again, with anything in astrology, there's polarity and understanding all sides of signs and transits and so on and so forth. So to look for a way, of the Leo moon. But again, anyway, I'm not trying to talk negatively. I'm just trying to see all the sides of it. It's just, um,
Well, and it's a late degree there. So
yeah,
this is not a new issue. It could be coming to terms with either one of these things for
yeah,
all of us individually, and as a country, and also how we, I mean, it's the fourth house, how we relate to our land. And
yep,
because I think just having Taurus rising with Uranus there's going to be definitely environmental things that are going to come up in the next 6 months as well here too. So
mhm,
it's a loaded chart, and I think the eclipses are absolutely going to activate it. But I guess we'll
definitely.
hope for yeah.
Yeah,
I guess we'll hope for the best here. We're gonna lean into that idea of like caring for one another and in times of need. And hope for some changes. I mean, we are in the Pluto return for the US, so having Pluto on the midheaven is very apropos for whatever needs to
yeah.
go down.
I don't think there's any running away or hiding from anything now. I think it's
Right.
all in front of us. It's
Yeah.
what, and it's for a while. When we get into the Pluto ingress in cat and Aquarius, and when it sticks finally, there is no. It's all going to be in front of us, and we just have to pick how we deal with it. Choose how we deal with it. So
Yeah. So, all right. Well, hopefully we didn't we didn't scare you away with
yeah,
that
yeah,
ingress.
that's
But that's the reality of what life looks like right now. So, so let us go into so this is all how it starts. But it is interesting that we have that Mercury, Sun, inferior cazimi on the equinox. And then what's going to happen is the Mercury is going to retrograde right into Virgo again, literally the day after on the 23rd. So we have this, Mercury's doing its dance with the sun. It's moving back into Virgo. We also are experiencing that Venus in Virgo opposing Neptune that we were just talking about. And on the 24th, it will perfect that weekend, that Saturday. But this is all leading us to this is the dark cycle of the moon phase, because we're leading to our new moon at 2 degrees of Libra on Sunday, the 25th. So, I mean, Nicholas, what do you think about the kind of Mercury meeting the sun, moving back into Virgo, Venus going through these moves all before we reseed in a new moon?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You have some clarity that can come up with as Sun Mercury in a balsamic phase. You have Venus Neptune, which I think can contribute actually to clarity if it's followed through upon, because Venus and Neptune opposing each other. It's like there's the dream and the vision, and then there's the reality. And can you connect those two together? And what I'm saying by that is, with an opposition with two planets 180 degrees from each other, on paper, when we learn astrology, we try to bring the two together and to find the balance between the two, to integrate them. That's my philosophy. So you have actually potentials here of clarity in so many different ways in the most darkest of places.
Yeah.
With in a balsamic moon, and what could happen there. And in a sense, you could call it I could say that it's some sort of a pre-germination that's happening, because then you do have the new moon, right? And things don't just shoot out of the gate, but it is a cardinal new moon.
Yeah.
But here, some of the clarity and vision, if you were to find that before and bring that into the new moon, you got Pluto helping out here, I think, with some of this too. But it's like there you can begin to put it out of you, out into the world. And again, let's not forget the Libra thing. What happens? It doesn't mean you get everything that you want, but it does mean that you can negotiate for it. You can work with it. Trying to stay positive here. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's what came through me here on top of my head.
I was just thinking about your admittal. I don't know the word there, of being like, I used to be a cynical person. Now you're just looking for the positive side, because we have
I got
to.
Saturn in the first house for everybody listening. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
No, I think you're absolutely right about that, and especially because we wouldn't necessarily think that Venus opposing Neptune can bring us some clarity, but I think once Mercury crosses over from that cazimi moment with the sun at such a powerful degree, right? This is like a world point degree, and then it moves back into its own sign. So then Venus really gets even more of that discernment with Mercury retrograding back into Virgo on the 23rd. So she actually meets the opposition with Neptune when Mercury is in Virgo again. So I feel like that bodes well, at least for Venus being like, I'm perceiving this, on a more realistic side of things, because I think you're absolutely right. We are at this juncture point in life, and it's like, what is the dream? What's the vision? What is real? What do I need to do? All the pieces of the puzzle. How do I need to transition in order to make that a reality? Or is that a little too utopian in nature, or like ideal? And I have to kind of be like, no, this is how it is. I love it. What you were saying. I can have a little bit of this. I might not be able to have it all, but let's start picking this apart, because we're getting to this new moon on Sunday at 2 degrees Libra, and it's opposing Jupiter. And I mean, it's a cardinal new moon. It's going to move us forward. It's Jupiter. Jupiter's retrograde, but it's still in the essence of moving us forward. There, and it's playing off of the Cancer new moon that was square Jupiter around June 28th, I want to say, give or take. And then also the trine during Leo season. So, this Jupiter story, to go back to what you were talking about earlier in the program about chapters and this, we're writing this 2022, but I feel like these chapters are really building something much larger.
Yeah.
Volumes. It's like certain chapters are closing a volume, certain chapters are starting to write the next volume. But the discernment and Venus coming up against this Neptunian, vision, and then trining Pluto right at the same time, because, you make a trine to Pluto, once again, there's like this exposure that comes out, like you get really down to the realness of something. And so this seems like such a turning point of a new moon, at least in my mind, like literally, I mean, pun intended, I suppose, since it's cardinal, but it's it's turning in the sense of me and you, because we got to come back to Libra Aries and what we kind of started the program with.
Yep. And that's because of Jupiter and Aries and it opposing. And again, this is another chapter. We started this podcast talking about we're in a current Mercury opposing Jupiter. And so here's a big part of the story now, a bigger part. Pluto, to me, saves the day in this chart. If you don't take Pluto into account, please do, because I think having the relationship, even though Mercury's retrograde in Virgo, but having this Earth flow between Pluto and Mercury here, the practicality along with straightforward truth, with that, actually not a 2-page letter, a paragraph that's concise and clear and clean and brutally honest.
Yeah,
what can happen right here. And we need that, especially in the always interesting story with the Aries Libra polarity. Aries is going to bust through the door Mars and just not even think about what they're going to say. Libra is not going to bust through the door Venus. They're going to wait and hear everybody else out. Maybe they say their truth. Maybe they hear other people's truth. In the end, the truth needs to be up on the table. So, if you think about the Mercury retrograde, if you think about this new moon, and in the end, what Libra Aries does, it's a Mars Venus thing in the end, but it's like the relating and what's going on. Sometimes we hear one side or whatever, but then there's the truth. At least for this time being, it is the brutal truth and the acceptance of that. And then still this retrograde isn't done. Then you take that in and you're going to process that. But at least it's not flaky. It's not a flaky thing. It requires acceptance of, like, this is what it is. Earth practical level, Mercury, trine Pluto, Earth signs, blah, blah, blah. This is what it is. And it's like, okay. And you know what? There's actually safety in that. It's groundedness in something like that. Because if it's not flaky, then at least you know where everybody stands, and then you can go from there.
I love that. I love that. The idea of it not being flaky, because I mean, not to say that Libra can be flaky, or Gemini, we'll put that in there. No, but think about it. Here we have this Venus, Mercury, Pluto connection. It's almost like we get to talk the Venus. We get to be real about the Venus, and the Jupiter component backed by Mars in a trine to Saturn. That puts a little bit of a break on the Mars a little bit. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to be as flighty or on the go or take this or take that. It's honing into Saturn. Saturn's like, hold up, Mars. In order to do this, in order for this to flow, in order for the chapter to turn and to write the new things, we have to, have some order, have some form, have some patience, have some accountability.
Saturn isn't so bad, everybody. Just to let you know, like, like what Saturn could do, what Saturn brings, the constructiveness of it all, the reality. Hey, like you just said, Melissa, like, hey, hold up a second. This could work, actually.
Yeah.
This could work, but it requires this work or this truth or this. And again, you asked me in the beginning of this, balsamic wise, what's happening, and some Neptune influence. Can you find the clarity? And in a sense, can one like imagine and dream of a solution or of a way? And then you get to this point where there's concrete things involved, reality things, and there is a way. There is a way. Oh my gosh, more positive stuff.
I know. You know what that makes me yeah, because there is a way, and I think part of the way has everything to do with strategy. Because that seems very Mars, Saturn, and air signs to me.
And
And the
Libra,
bigger
really.
in Libra, and the bigger
Being,
picture of Jupiter being there to kind of guide it along. It's like there, and well, in Mercury too. I mean, Virgo is very strategic in what all the bits that need to fit together in order to, move something into its state of yeah, I don't want to say perfection, but into the state we want it to be in, or the state that it needs to transition in to become the next thing. And so it's like we're getting real. There's integrity here. There's things to figure out. We got to work with one another, and we got to be strategic. And life is moving. Life is turning. I mean, that's just the essence here. So you might find yourself in this position with this new moon because that's just where you are. I mean, sometimes we don't choose what we need to turn to or what we need to act towards, right? A lot of people are in situations like I wasn't expecting to be here. But we work with that. We mold it to our advantage, right? I feel like that is a big part of this new moon too, where we can, I don't want to say make lemonade out of lemons. I mean, it's not that bad of a new moon, but I feel like a lot of us have been thrown some things in the last handful of months, or just this year, or maybe in the last 3 years. And so I feel like it's I like that about this. I like that.
Yeah, I think just to say this, there are things that we cannot control that happen to us. What we can control, and what I tell people, and I think a lot of astrologers, our colleagues, know, like, we get to places when we're talking to our clients, and it feels like it's just things are overbearing. And to remind yourself what the true power of being human is that you have the choice. You have the choice to react to things and to alter things. It might not be perfect. You can't control what happens to you, but you can choose to how you react, how to stand, or what to work with. Sometimes you're ready to work. Other times you have to wait. It just doesn't come to you, but it's there. And and you just have to remember that you do have choice. And it's just in our inherent superpower. We all have it. So remember that with all the transits and the stuff that's been really hard for years, and these things that are just testing us at all angles. And then we have a lunation like this new moon, and we're trying to find the juice. We're trying to find the center point, right? And we're what you can do. And here's a great example of just not something that's just a thought. It's something that could be put into action and play slowly. So
you know what came into my head, Nicholas? It was Devo, freedom of choice.
Oh yeah.
Freedom of choice. Freedom of choice. Yeah. So if you need a little
you want to
little
lose
boost.
yourself, people, go look at Devo and the reason why they're called Devo.
I know, de-evolution.
De-evolution,
It's fitting on a few different levels here, but do yourself a favor, YouTube freedom of choice, just to get your blood pumping, just to get you excited about the fact that you have, it's very Libra new moon opposed Jupiter.
I don't think I'm ever gonna talk anywhere again where someone brings up Devo in the middle of the podcast lecture or whatever in the astrology world. Only you.
Only I. That's you. True. Only me. Only me. But do it, people. Devo out. Go Go de-evolutionize yourself. Oh my God, I love it. So, as we said, this is a powerful new moon. This is a powerful start. This is a powerful cardinal moment. And we get to kind of like inject it a little bit longer, right? It happens on Sunday, the 25th. But on the following day, on the 26th, as we're kind of getting seated in this period with the Libra moon still doing its thing, that's when Mercury retrogrades over Venus, and we also perfect the Sun Jupiter opposition. So we kind of have a couple days, of just really, and that's a Monday. I mean, I know personally what's going on for me on this day
Uh-huh.
is my in humility and partnership relating, my partner crashed my car this week.
Oh,
Oh yeah, rear-ended someone. It looks like my car got punched in the face pretty bad. So I am on this Mercury retrograde patience mission of we're not able to get the car into the actual body shop to be fixed again until this date, which I find is very, very on point. For I mean, that's just a like little side note story, but Mercury retrograde over Venus, helping this poor car get back into shape. But
yeah, that's
yeah,
that. I'm sorry about that,
I
by the
know.
way.
Spoiler alert to our Venus group later. Nicholas and I are in a Venus
Yes.
talisman group. And so this is one of my Venus stories, and having to have grace in partnerships when when you hear some news that you don't want to hear. But my point being is that this is a big start to the week. Like I feel like Monday is going to really give us like kind of a kickoff point to get things in motion, tie up loose ends, tie up whatever's happened just recently,
Yeah.
and move this story along.
Yeah, more relating. Another chapter, another part of the relating angle. Even if we don't look at the Jupiter, Sun, and the Moon still in Libra, right? But we just Venus, Mercury alone together.
Yeah.
There is some talking going on.
Lots of
More
talking.
more talking, and more in Virgo, picking the pieces, the ones maybe the pieces and the parts of the engine that are not running at the most optimal.
Figuratively and literally speaking.
Literally. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many, like on Nextdoor, like the app, the neighborhood app, it's like every day someone's car has been crashed, it's been stolen, people's cars are just getting mutilated during this Mercury retrograde because it's like backing the slowing Mars and Gemini. It's like, it's just
Yeah.
insane. So it's like, I
Yeah.
feel I'm probably going to have like all these inbox messages saying, oh, wow,
Well,
my car too,
just a side note here. Do you know that the used car market is exploded as in worth and price in
Oh
this
yeah,
last year?
it's so hard to get a
It's
used car right
Yep,
now because of the
it is.
manufacturing.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, side note there.
No, it's
Yeah.
it's true.
Mhm.
Well, another thing that could be going on too with this, because I we might have alluded to it, but just thinking about the new moon in Libra pushing forward with this Venus Mercury action and having come off a cazimi at 0 degrees of Libra, there could be a lot of partnerships that are being formed, just
Yeah.
even behind the scenes. And we're just getting together and we're just putting into we're talking about how we're going to work this all out. And maybe it's not out in the open or anything now, but we're on the other side of the Mercury Sun cazimi. So this is essentially kind of mercurial new territory that's happening, and it's meeting Venus right away. So I feel like if anybody's forming certain partnerships right now, and even if they're just kind of tiptoeing into it or just getting settled or changing the page on one into a new era. I always talk in big terms. Mercury, Jupiter, I'm like, everything's big in life.
Listen, like we said in the beginning, I said we're a living opera. So just go for it on the
I'm like,
imaginary
oh,
scale. We are the characters, we are the gods and goddesses. It is that way, okay?
it can
So
be big, people. But I feel like that's a big part of it. So if you are teaming up or starting a new chapter there and have to get together with people and form unions or bonds or etc., um or even start to work out or rework contractual obligations, I feel like especially with Mars trining Saturn, because essentially that's what happens next on the 27th, on Tuesday. It really is a big start to the week, because on Tuesday we still got this moon in Libra for the most part, and we have this exact trine between Mars and Saturn, and then Mercury retrograde and Pluto. So more talking. I feel like more talk. And this Mars Saturn piece, this is the first pass, because Mars is going to retrograde back, make a trine to Saturn once again, and then not until next year it's going to trine Saturn once more, but they're going to move into water signs at that point. So this is another big structural component that's going on too within this.
Yeah, I think it's great that you pointed this out, because when we get in the long-term story of the Mars and Gemini retrograde in the station, and oh my God, it's going to last all the way till March, and so on and so forth. If you're looking for the guiding light to all this, is this Mars a Saturn piece, because the other piece is going to be Mars Neptune, a mutable square. So you're going to need Saturn. You need it. And this the timing of this, because right now on the chart that you have here on the 27th, Saturn's at 19 and really close here. We're going to probably mention it here. Is Saturn. We're actually going to have every single dang planet in the thing retrograde. You're going to have Saturn moving, which is going to move really slow, but if you're going to have the anchor, if you're going to have some sort of planet to work with, and it's Mars, it's not a Mars-Saturn opposition. It's not a square. They're flowing with each other. And this is where you can have the drive and the focus to construct and build. You utilize this. And even if it doesn't come out through your hands in the physical universe, what happens in your mind and what Saturn brings, which in the end, I love the crystallization part of Saturn. It being in an Aquarius, it is on point there. It's deep in the scientific lab, synthesizing and rising. And you have Mars and Gemini there, where the thought, the ideas, the thoughts and opinions, what happens with Hermes going back and forth from this world to the underworld, the secrets and the mystery that it brings. And you could take those mystery and secrets and the word, and you could take the Saturn and Aquarius and crystallize those things together and build something amazing, not just for today or that week. It's for the long term. So, I got really excited about that.
I know, I'm getting excited about it. Well, I see it in my own life. I mean, everything you're saying, I'm seeing in my own life. I'm seeing in the people's lives around me. Like so many people are at this major turning point of energy and logistics for the long term, and where I'm, setting up shop and laying down foundations, and it's this. And we need that. That's when we need this Mars Saturn piece, because there is going to be that timeout, or maybe that confusion, or that diffusion of my mind goes blank, of Mars and Saturn, or not Mars, excuse me, Mars and Neptune squaring that's coming up. And so it's almost like this kind of precursor moment where we really kind of get to lay down the plans, or get the first, blueprint of what that might look like. Sure, it might change, but we're at this point that can start to get us there. And if we give it space and give it time, it will reconfigure itself and then come back around for its, once we get past the retrograde, or not the retrograde as a whole, but just the stationing part that Mars is going to be doing and squaring Neptune. So it's like, use this time. I mean, it's like, really, it's like, use this time. It's like this fresh energy that is, like you said, it's still, there's still these retrograde components, right? Saturn is not quite direct. Jupiter is not direct, but it's this behind the scenes work. It's this, it could be internalization that's happening. Like, you got to change or strategize inside before it can meet the outer world to begin with.
I beautifully said, Melissa. I think right with this particular, at this moment with that, it's more of the internalization, and maybe like, and then you start to see how things can be, and then you start to gather your resources and tools internally. But it's definitely an internal moment there. So yeah, fully agree. I
Yeah.
like that. That was awesome.
I'm gonna tell you the
Yeah.
inside job, right? You gotta you
Yeah.
gotta do it there first, and then everything starts to change. Because then if you try to change before you're ready on the inside, we know how that happens. The trickster starts coming out, and you're like, "Oh, you're not ready yet. Let me put this in your way. You haven't thought about that."
Exactly. Yeah.
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 So,
And remember,
uh,
let's just one more thing. Remember, this is still Mercury retrograde. So again, I think the internalization of it all, especially Mercury, Venus there being in Virgo, more internalization there. And you got Pluto helping you out. Yeah, you could start to formulate and plan, and you don't have to, it's not a rushing thing. You're not have to rush to do it,
yeah. Well, we're about to roll out the I guess we'll say the white carpet. Um for the next move, we have Venus moving into Libra. She's done her
Nice.
Venus her Virgo tour. And on Thursday, September 29th, we're gonna wake up to Venus being in Libra. Saucy Scorpio moon on the south node, but hey, Venus.
That's okay.
Well,
That's all
yeah,
right.
it's like, yeah, we'll work with that. I know. I'm like, right as she moves into Libra, it's like the moon and Scorpio opposing Uranus. But hey. So here she is. And really, so we're going to talk a little bit about Venus moving to Libra, but let's also think about, just a couple days later on October 1st, on that Saturday, she's going to make her opposition to Jupiter over the weekend, which I think could bode well for a nice weekend there. But let's pull back and talk just real quick about Venus in Libra. We've talked a little bit about it, but any additional thoughts? Anything we want to do lip service for her coming home?
You can order some new sheets for your bed, and you can get some stuff for the house. Anything that is going to make you feel harmonized within your home, because that's what Venus just did a trip, let's say, and went through these other signs, and then is like coming home, walking through the door. What do you do when you haven't been home for a while, and then you walk in, and not only that, the Venus in Libra house is just set up in a way. There's going to be maybe a little bit higher ceilings. There's going to be a nice a stereo system. The couch, the chairs, velour possibly. That's why I brought up the sheets for the bed. I was thinking, hey, let's get it's a good meal. We're gonna have some ravioli and make some sauce.
We're gonna have some friends over.
We're gonna have
I
some
feel like
friends
friends
over.
over.
Yeah, exactly. And we're gonna like have the deal, and we're gonna hear each other out in a way that no judgment, let's say. And it says no judgment. Hey, what's your story? And I'm like, okay, what's your story? And here's my story. And we're all heard. We're all heard, and our bellies are full. And it not only that, something in the background. I don't know what that smell is, but it smells really good. I don't know what you're burning. It's like, oh, this is this new frankincense that I got, or this myrrh that I got, and we burn it. It's like, oh, where did you get that? And it's high quality. So just painting a picture of what could happen. And amongst all those little things, it's like, in the end, are we being seen and heard? And we are. And that's what could happen. And that's what does happen when Venus is in Libra, and it's not just the physicalness that can happen with that, but I think it's a thing where everyone is acknowledged as a human being in the house, and seen for who they are, and contributing to this interrelative organic cohesiveness of love. Anyway.
I love it.
Yeah,
I
that's
love it.
that's my version of it. But
Well, and it
yeah.
makes a lot of sense because we got a Libra, we got a Venus in Taurus, and we got a Venus in Libra. Venus in Taurus is a little more of that sensual nature. I mean, Libra will take it there too, but maybe a little more aesthetic and visually. But it's there's a personalization in Taurus, but in Libra, there's this more openness to all. And ideals and just everyone, like you said. And I feel like her walking through the door and she's like, "Oh, I'm finally home. Look at this place. It might be a little hot in here because I'm right next to the sun." But she's
Yeah,
like, "Did
yeah.
someone leave on the heater? What happened here?" But I feel like she takes a big
Yeah,
breath of air. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let me get a facial. Let me let me get
yeah.
situated. Let me call up my friends. Let me put on a good album. Let me stay a while, as long as I can. As it gets a little bit hotter and hotter, because I mean she's back home, but she is in combust territory.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
we can't ignore that. But
there is something that's about to happen here. And,
yes.
and and I won't say yet till we get to it. So let's leave a little bit of mystery for those watching and listening. But after everything that you just said and I just said about Venus coming home, there is something that's about to happen that's not particularly normal
Yeah.
here.
For her
So
in that, yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, precursor, we'll let's just sit on that. But you know what, I love it going into the weekend of Friday the 30th, October 1st. I mean, we got a whole weekend for the most part, at least like Friday and Saturday. We got the moon in Sag. Friday, it's gonna sextile that Venus. Like, I mean, that to me, Venus is opposing Jupiter. It's kind of good times. Like, I feel like we got
Yeah.
some stuff done during the week where we feel like we're on point to something. And I just feel like there's good energy in the air for that Friday, Saturday with Venus finally home, Jupiter action, and then
Hmm.
the moon kind of chiming in there. So take
Yeah.
advantage.
Yeah. Thank you,
Because
Sag Moon. Thank
yeah,
you. Yeah.
thank you for giving us that now and it's interesting too, because think about it. It's like I want to say there's like a lightheartedness, right? Because when we can spend time with people that we love, we can have some laughs, we can let loose a little bit. On Sunday, on the 2nd of October, that's when Mercury is stationing direct. So Mercury is emerging there too. So not to say that the weekend will be totally, free from all the tricks that Mercury might have, but it's emerging. This is a
Yeah.
different, it's almost like, so it's interesting. There's this lightness that kind of comes around as we're turning this mental page, right? There, and Mercury is finally coming out. Now granted that will happen on Sunday, and we'll have a Capricorn moon. So maybe we'll lean more into the earthy, serious practical side of things with Mercury emerging after we have our party moment.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like a nice way to come out of it. Or at least I think so.
Well, it's funny you say a nice way to come out of it, because really here, because of Venus being in Libra, Mercury stationing, we kind of have a lot of the internalization that's what we've been talking about. Now, slowly things are coming out, like because of the Mercury station, just and inherently just because of the sociableness of Venus and Libra and the Sun being in Libra, slowly there's a little bit more of the internal process and what has been reviewed,
Mm.
and now it starts to little bit by little bit show itself. So
Yeah, and it's so interesting because right, but Mercury and Venus both play such big roles in our life. It's like how we perceive things, how we talk about things, how we relate
mhm.
to others, how we're feeling sense of harmony within ourselves. And it's like we get to take this load off, so to speak, right before action takes place, right? Because on Sunday, with that Capricorn moon, we got Mercury stationing direct, and we have a first quarter moon in Capricorn, and that kind of sets things off. I mean, first quarter moon's pushing, it's bringing action to the stage. It's in Capricorn, so we're getting something that's very, practical, physical, real world off the ground, or feeling the tension to.
Mhm.
We're probably thinking about what's happening on Monday. We're like, we're getting ready for
Getting ready for the
how
week. Yeah.
we're getting ready,
Yeah.
because we're like, okay, we've done this. I've released a little with the Venus. My mind is on point, because Mercury is essentially stationing direct with that trine to Pluto. So we have this focalized mercurial concentration this whole time. Like our head is, to me, in some game. Like we're like, okay, this is what's happening. And to
Yeah.
have that push off there, I really like it. It's like we can get down to business.
Yeah. There's a lot that's been going on. And just as a reminder, this stationary point with Mercury in this weekend, we could go back here to the end of August. And when Mercury was over these degrees, basically.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for the thread, you know, you can go back to that time when Mercury is 24, 25, 26 in Virgo. You can make connections in the retrograde story here. And not that things just shoot out of the gate here, but you could start to piece something together if you haven't already. If you didn't start to piece it together when Mercury was conjunct the Sun, cazimi, at least at this point, you get to start to see it and put it together. And if you need a reminder of what some of those things are, you can go back to the end of August. So that's just a quick something.
No, I like that. Chances are that story is moving with new pieces and new points of, new POVs. Yeah. So, and it's interesting too, because as we launch off this week and there's kind of just a lot of energy to like get out there, get things done. Our mind's on point. We're starting off with the Capricorn energy. There's not a whole lot of action actually that leads us up to the full moon that's coming on the following Sunday on the 9th. It's like, the moon's going to move through Capricorn and Aquarius and Pisces. Of course, we're going to get some Saturn action. We'll get that. Let me back that up. Because to play off of what I was just saying with Mercury going direct and get, right? Because it's really slow again. It's trying to gain speed and it's all doing so in this trine to Pluto. So the moon will conjunct Pluto on Tuesday, actually at AM. So a lot of us will be sleeping when this particular thing happens. But Mercury is then going to perfect its trine once more, the third trine with Pluto on Thursday, I believe, on the 6th. But what's interesting is actually in between that, when the moon is in Aquarius, because we're gonna touch on this a little bit in the full moon that's coming up with in Aries. But Saturn, as Nicholas pointed out a little earlier, Saturn's getting ready to emerge itself. It's going to go direct actually on the last day of Libra season, or close to the last day. And this is as close as Saturn and Uranus are going to get again, right? So they're both at 18 degrees at this point. So when we have a moon in Aquarius going over Saturn there on Wednesday leading up to it, this is a big piece of the puzzle too.
Yeah, it triggers it. Yeah. And for those who are always learning about astrology stuff, when you have smaller the inner planets or something like the moon, if you want to track something or track how things go, you can look to something in the moon to set outer body aspects off. Like sometimes you don't see it. Saturn you do, but sometimes with the outer bodies you're not going to catch it per se. It isn't until another planet comes through and sets it off, and then you can understand. And so someone who is an Aquarius moon like me, thank you for this reminder. I'm definitely
mark your calendar.
Yeah, I'm gonna mark this calendar. But on a deep level of Saturn Uranus structurally, and what happens behind the scenes in your own personal life and for the world, you have a type of tension where obviously with any square, the release needs to happen. How does it happen is key. And it can be tough, honestly. This change and then the holding on to things, let's say with Saturn and then Uranus, who wants to move things forward, and then they're kind of I always use this thing of like two cars are running through a stop sign at the same time, and they're 90 degrees away from each other, and then something happens, they collide. And what breaks, what doesn't, like what comes out of something like that? So, I think here in this particular case, you might see it more happening on the Saturn and Aquarius end because the moon is there. And that's where you might see it most obvious. It doesn't say it's the only piece of the story because Uranus and Taurus is there, but this is an ongoing, longer term story for all of us, and how we resist change, how we accept change, and can you take both sides somehow with you to the next place? You know, what do you leave behind, and what do you take with you? You know, so that's the simple way I could say this, because we can get all philosophical about it, and plenty of articles on this stuff. But I just like to keep things simple when we talk about this. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I think it's simple to say that this particular week, you know, is going to have a lot of activity because it's mostly Mercury moving to merge. We have this lighting up of the Saturn-Uranus piece that we were just talking about here. Pluto is about to go direct on the 8th on Friday, or what is that, Saturday?
Yeah.
Saturday.
Saturday.
And that moon in Aquarius, actually, when it meets Saturn, kind of lights up like this tight Saturn-Uranus square, about as tight as it's going to get again. We have it, you know, the moon is coming off a trine with the sun. So it, you know, the sun is slowly going to make this trine with Saturn too. So, you know, when Nicholas is talking about like leaning into the Saturn piece of it, I think you're absolutely right, because the sun is coming into this and Venus is going to come into this, and they're all going to connect with Saturn here. And if you listen to the last episode on Mars retrograde, and we were going through the eclipses coming up, that lunar eclipse is going to be in a square to Saturn. So you can absolutely think, if we're touching down on Saturn now, there's a big piece that is connecting with this as it's preparing to emerge. Pluto's emerging, everything's emerging, everything's popping out like it's spring, but it's fall.
It's I know well, for some of us who are listening, you
It
say
could
it's
be
spring, but
yeah.
but in general, that there's movement that's happening here in a way, and on multiple levels, on the very, like you could say, very in front of you level with Mercury, you know, but then Saturn, it's very tangible. You can work with it. That's why I was saying lean on the Saturn, because even though it can be tough, it's made to be worked with. That's what it's all about.
That is what it's all about.
So
as long as you don't reject it, you know, you gotta work with it.
Yeah, there's a famous, let me say this. Rob Hand wrote a book, is an astrologer, called Essays on Astrology. And there's an essay in there on the malefics. And he basically says, when it comes to Saturn, anything. Listen, I'm a Saturn astrologer. I have Saturn in my first. People who come to me, they're having a Saturn story. I've just been doing this for years. And I tell them that Saturn brings temporary rule sets. And this is what Rob talks about in his essay. If you can accept the temporary rule set that's not maybe the rule set you want to deal with, that kind of takes a little of the fun of life, like your friends are out partying, and then Saturn's like, you have to stay home and work on something, but it's like, it's 85 degrees, my friends are partying, and you're like, no, you can't. Saturn's like, you got to do this. And it's, if you realize and accept it's temporary, the rule set, it's not forever, then you could start to work with it. Then it's not a weight on your shoulders and the resistance that Saturn would bring. That's when you start to work with it. It's when you accept reality. And so for those listening, you're going to go check out a very clear way of looking at the malefics. It's in that book, Rob Hand, Essays on Astrology. So quick book thing right there.
I love that. You know what it makes me think of too is the good rule of thumb, where it's like, do the hard work first. Do the thing you don't want to do first, so you can do the easy thing or do the play afterwards. Because if you play or you do the easy thing first, the hard thing is just going to be that much harder.
You fear, you start to fear it.
Exactly. So it's like, it's almost like roll up your sleeves, get in there. You know, I feel like just the connection of earth energy for the week of this week of October 3rd with Mercury. I feel like Earth is going to be shifting. Things are going to be moving. Life is going to be transitioning, and we might have to roll up our sleeves, especially midweek, because we're in Saturn territory, but we're doing it because we want balance, right? We're in this Libra season. We're doing it because we're trying to harmonize things. We're trying to move things forward. We see the bigger picture of it. And so it's like, just get in there, do it, you know. because it's like the moon is going to continue to wax and wax. We'll get that Pisces moment where maybe we'll get a little on the weekend, Friday and Saturday. We'll have some Pisces moon
Is that
action.
Pisces moment? Someone
That
microdosing the whole weekend?
oh my God.
Is that what that is that what's happening?
Perhaps, right.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna get that moon Neptune action. But we got to think of that all the energy is apexing to the Sunday's full moon in Aries. And when you have a full moon in Aries, this is like a fresh start that's culminating. This is cardinal energy. This is something having to show up for something that could actually be rather fast. Like I think about Aries a lot of times with crisis. Like you've had a full moon in Aries, you don't know what can necessarily happen. Not to paint that picture. I don't want to scare people. But there is that kind of like jumping in and jumping into the fire and just being really activated. That is part of, like, to me, an Aries full moon, but it also creates the tension once again, where this, I versus you, the balance of the opposites, etc. And so, I mean, what do you see mid afternoon, late evening? So in the Northern Hemisphere, or at least here in US, we are going to be awake for it. So what do you think, Nicholas?
I cannot help but look at the wounded healer right there.
I know. And I left that out, actually. That was a big thing with this week. Maybe I did that. Was that a Freudian slip? I don't think that's a Freudian slip, but did I the purposeful ignoring that? But because the sun does oppose Chiron,
it does,
on Friday, 2 days before, but it is definitely in this moon.
It's in play. I think the whole thing too of what we've talked about this whole time of like the compiling of our thoughts and the internalization during the retrograde, and then we have the equinox of what and what Venus wants to do and harmonize, and hearing and seeing all sides, and the relating, and the aesthetic, and your senses, and the politics of relating, and here we have like a pinnacle moment here, because it's like, what about me?
Yeah.
What about me? Because what can happen is when the Libra story gets off balance, anybody knows any Libra, they're in a relationship with one, or Libras out there, there is a moment always where you're like, where did this Libra person who's Venus ruled, it's just always chill, it's always good listening, have an emotional explosion that is like, where did this come from? And when the archetypal story of Libra, when it gets off balance and it doesn't get its needs met, and it's making sacrifices, everyone else gets heard first, and everyone at the party got to say what they had to say, but Libra didn't, or so on and so forth. At some point it does come out. And so it could play out that way too. And so if you're by yourself as a Libra, or you're let's say you're a Libra and you're with an Aries, and what could happen with each other, it's like you learn from the Aries. You learn to speak your mind and speak your needs first and foremost, because that's what the Aries moon is going to do. It's going to say, me, feed me. This is what I want. Instinctual, impulsive now. So there's a lesson for Libra to learn it at every Aries full moon, I think, is to learn the balance of that, and the other way around, of what an Aries moon could learn from the Libra way of doing things, of just not jumping through really quick and just trying to see past themselves when it comes to relating. So this is some basic stuff that I'm saying here, but I think it's really in play because of the setup we've had here, what we've been talking about discussions, about the word, about internalization, and now it comes out in situations like this. And and Venus getting closer to the sun,
ooh, she's like sweating.
Yeah. And there's layers being burnt off, in a sense. Like there's layers of Venus getting closer to the sun. It's raw. It's getting raw just for that. And then you bring in just an inherent raw energy, raw power, raw everything with the moon in Aries. And full moon, it's all out there in the open. There's no hiding. There's no something. And by the way, this could be really hot, by the way, like in general.
Like in general, it'd be very hot. Well, and it's interesting too. I think you made some really good points there, because I love the word that you used, raw, because there is a rawness to this, right? You know, because the moon is essentially going to cross over Chiron, first Venus and then Chiron before it
Mhm.
meets the sun. And you know, Chiron and Aries there, it's just like, and I feel like I want to say that you're a Chiron and Aries native.
I
Is
was
that right?
just in my
Yeah,
mind
looks like,
thinking I'm
yeah, well, I'm
having
gonna
that
pick your
Chiron
brain
return.
about that.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I think about the rawness of, yeah, like you said, what about me? Or, and it might even be so much what about me either. It's just like the instinct that comes up with Aries, that it can put you in a place of the wound, what the wound might look like, with you're not even being like necessarily cerebral about it. Like it just was, it's
Mhm.
going to boil something to the surface that then starts to play on the I versus the we, because essentially Venus, who's getting really hot next to the sun, is going to oppose Chiron right after this. But we also have to take into effect that Mars over there in Gemini is getting really close to this
Yep.
square with Neptune that's coming just a few days later. So Mars is not necessarily thinking clearly either. You know, like there could be a part of the thing, you know, I feel like sometimes when we're going for our own agenda, or we're connecting with the
Yeah.
wound, we can grasp at straws, or we can get to the victim mentality, or
Mhm.
the, you know, so I feel like there is this part of the aggression, right? Because I mean, aggression and anger, and this can all come up with an Aries full moon, right? You know, where it all just
Totally.
blows.
Mhm.
But I feel like it's coming from a place that either that might not be entirely clear, whether that's in the sense that we're either deceiving ourselves or deceiving other. I mean, there could be deception in the air that comes out with this too, where certain relationships, you know, all of a sudden maybe people were out for themselves and you didn't see it, or I don't
Yep.
know,
Yep.
yeah, there's these parts that come up, but it also, we can be taken by surprise of like what's behind there too, because I mean, Mars, Neptune. I mean, what do you think? Okay, I want to know about Mars, Neptune. I also want to hear your thoughts on Chiron
Oh,
and
Chiron,
Aries.
I have some thoughts. Yeah,
I know you do.
I'm so glad though. You're so glad you brought the Mars Neptune here, because Mars and Gemini is ruling,
Yeah.
the moon in Aries and the Chiron in Aries, and obsession
Mm,
is a thing that could happen here. And what I mean by that, with the Mars driving and then the square with Neptune, it's like you can get lost in something that you think is real and obsess about it, and like take it in and want to take in as much as you can with it, because you think it's real. You think it can be completely delusional, and like you can get high off of that. That's something to be careful of
mm.
there. At the same, and for those who have aspects like this, like a Mars Neptune in your chart, what you do to take yourself away from things, how you so-called quote unquote disconnect, or how you enter the dream world, or how you deal with visions and so on and so forth. There's interesting energy that happens there. But if you're dealing with rawness in the end and the me first, it could totally be a victim mode, or like, look what you did to me. And it might not even be real what it is. But if it's touching upon a wound, Chiron, you're not, it's not just in your head. You could be reliving something
Mm.
on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And you're not right. There's no right or wrong there, but it's just a reliving of what could happen. And in those moments, it's really hard to be objective.
Yes.
It's touching not just your mind. Now we're talking mind here. I'm bringing mind up because of Mars and Gemini and what's going to happen with Neptune, what can happen in the mind and the fantasy and the fog and the illusions. But it doesn't stick there, I think, because of this full moon. I think it can hit the rawest of places, and that can be hard. At the other side of this, the rawest of places can be exposed through a little bit of some vessel that Mars and Neptune do together. Mars going through the vessel of Neptune. Maybe it is a dream that you wake up with that morning, that something that you've been suppressing,
Mm.
something that's been internalized so deep for whatever reason, just for pure survival mode, so you can live on this dang planet and get through the day, that it exposes itself in some other way. You can actually be creative with some of this. If we're talking about remediation, You can use the Mars-Neptune square in a way where you can filter things out and run through a vessel to deal with what hurts or what you feel is a need to say, hey, this is what I need and this is what I want. Because for some of us and for many, they don't know how to ask for what they want or need. And it gets into the world of passive aggressiveness where you don't state what you want and need because you're in fear of rocking the boat, which is a Libra story a lot of the times too. It's like they're not going to say the ultimate truth or what they need sometimes because it can disrupt the harmonization that was built up to that point. So I'm trying to bring it all the way around and connect it, and not leave any of you listening or watching saying that you're effed with a transit like this or what could that, but it definitely is triggering. It's a definite raw thing. It's just remember, you have the choice. You have tools available to you, Now, saying that, you asked me about Chiron. So, as someone who's having their Chiron return, I'm 51 years old. As someone who's been dealing with this on a client level, I've done videos on this too. I just let me say this out there. You Aries people out there, or people who have planets in Aries, whatever degrees. Right now, we're Chiron's here at 14 degrees, but you're at the midpoint. I feel for you. I feel for you because there's a type of vulnerability involved in here that even a typical Aries story is to show themselves or so on and so forth. But there's the other part of the Aries and Mars story of protection and armor and sword and shield. And what happens to upkeep something like that, to upkeep the armor, upkeep the fight. And sometimes you can't fight. Sometimes part of a warrior's life is to descansar. And when I say descansar, it's to like rest in Spanish. You have to rest. You have to tend to your own wounds. And not only that, sometimes you've got to show people that stuff, and that can be so hard. So I feel you out there, you Aries people, planets with people with Mars and Aries, people without that, because you raw, not only you've been fighting, your wounds have been exposed. Some of the wounds have been bleeding. Now you've been along this Chiron and Aries trip, you've been attending to those wounds and finding the tools. But here is a major part of the story here this year with this full moon, and it's like I'm not telling people what to do here, my Aries people, or signatures like that. But I think vulnerability is huge. And I think if you have the space and the vessel and the tools and the people to support you, you don't have to do it alone, my Aries people. You don't have to be the loner on the path. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to find the tools. And in the end, you're going to get what you really want anyway, to be seen for your purest, raw self, to put your will into the world, wounds and all, but to be supported at the same time. You don't have to walk alone. So that's a weird way of talking about the Chiron and Aries story. And personally, for me, it's been a story of that, of learning to ask and learning to tend to wounds and not take on the lone wolf mentality. Not only that, when you're dealing with a society that teaches men to buck up, to swallow the pain, to do it alone, to not show your feelings, to not be vulnerable. Even in 2022, we've had a lot happen in the last 40, 50 years when it comes to gender roles and so on and so forth, Phil, but there's still this thing, and you see it in society, and you see it in our politics, you see it everywhere. You see this having to buck up and to fight and whatever, but you could see right past it. You could see right past it. And when you look right past it and look into the eyes of this, you see wounds and fear and a wanting to be seen and loved. So if we think about this Chiron and Aries, that's my version of it. It's like, to be a warrior is to show yourself. It doesn't mean just swinging the sword. To be a warrior is to show your heart. So I just went on their rant, another rant there, Melissa. But
I like a good rant, especially a passionate one.
Yeah.
And you're speaking from a place of knowing, like, I
Yeah.
mean, that's the thing, is it's like you're not conceptualizing what this might be like.
Yeah.
You have experience,
And it's
you
also
know.
accepting. I think being in the middle of a Chiron return, it's the typical thing in the astrology world that you hear. Like a lot of times you're having a personal transit, and then the clients you're getting or storylines that you're
Oh
getting
yeah,
is the same
it's
thing.
tapping
So
right
like
in.
you're that's when you think you don't you thank your clients to yourself at night because they're bringing you like clarity at the same time. And
100%.
at the same time, it's reciprocated because of your inner knowledge, and you're able to help people and they're helping you. So that anyway, that's
No, I love that you shared that, and I loved how you brought up the idea of like not having to do it all alone, and like having to
mhm.
ask for help, and like being uh, honoring the vulnerable parts in oneself, because I mean this really to me speaks to the idea too of the Mars Neptune piece, because Neptune is very vulnerable. That is a very vulnerable place. Grief lives there, like having
Mhm.
to show, you know, uh, what you might, I don't want to say be lacking, but like when we think about once again, the GoFundMe, the idea of like, I need help here.
Yeah.
I need to show, like, this is where that comes in. And I think there's really something to be said about that. Just when we think about the lead up to this full moon on October 9th, is that starting October 7th, when we actually have the Sun Chiron opposition, the exact one there, that's when that night the moon is going to cross over Neptune and square Mars. So there's like this lead in that happens on Friday the 7th that is going to play into this understanding of, or even the storyline. Once again, we're back to like chapters or paragraphs
Yeah.
of what Mars and the Mars square Neptune is going to look like, but it's coinciding with this Sun Chiron piece that is going to culminate into a full moon. And I mean, we have to look at the idea of like the rising energy that is taking us from Pisces,
Yep.
that vulnerable space and that emotional space, and to this the me, and the challenge, and sometimes the crisis and the personal story that comes in with Aries. So we're seeing these two signs back to back. So everything that you were saying really started to paint that picture in my mind of bringing the wounded, personalized experience, and having to show the vulnerability, and
Yeah, it's like
asking for help.
that Pisces moon and its conjunction to Neptune and what's about to do. The way is like saying is like you're lifting veils, or
Yeah.
veils are being lifted, and you're touching the divine, and
And then
that
it gets
place.
raw and personal
And it
right
gets,
after
and then
that.
you're like bringing that into raw and personal, like
Yeah.
again, I could see something like this situation where that's such an intense movement of energy that I can understand why people, when they touch upon these places, find ways to it's
To
overwhelming,
escape
it's
it.
too
Yeah.
much. That's why I bring up the tool aspect and the support, because of that. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and just saying there too, I mean, common sense maybe, but it's like that weekend on Friday, don't test the limits. Don't test the limits, or I'm just going to take a little bit more of this, or I'll have another one of these, or I'm
Yep.
just going to
Yep.
do, because it's a little bit of dangerous territory there, I have to say. And I think it'll be a very interesting week, or at least lead up to the weekend for the US too, because we have that Mars Neptune square in our chart, and we're having a Mars return to the US Mars at the same time this
Yeah, man.
week.
You
So
get see
just
like days like
FYI.
Twitter that weekend, Twitter and what people do and stuff, like what
Yeah,
they'll
that
say.
whole
And
weekend
yeah,
is going to be
yeah,
insane, right? With the Mercury, Pluto. So, not a lot going on in the skies, but tons going on in the skies. Like it's not,
no,
it's very concentrated.
this is a fascinating month actually out of the year
It
because of
is.
the intricacies of the transits within a small period of time. So
Yeah. So all right. So we go on from that Aries full moon on the 9th. And the next day on the 10th, as we start our Monday work week, which is not everyone's work week, but Monday we have Mercury actually is going to move back in to Libra. that day, that night there. But Mercury's going to move back into Libra. We have the moon moving into Taurus at that point. We also have yeah, so basically, okay, so let's think about Mercury moving back into Libra on the 10th, and then 2 days later on Wednesday, Mercury is going to make that third opposition with Jupiter that we started off the conversation about.
And we're currently in as we record this.
As we currently are in as we record this. So there's something that wraps up to me with that as well. Like there's a chapter that, so we're turning a page on that Mercury, Jupiter, and Jupiter just in general too, because keep in mind that the new moon opposed Jupiter. So Mercury coming around and being kind of the last planet that is going to, other than the moon, that's going to contact Jupiter before it moves back into Pisces, I'm pretty sure, is interesting to think about too.
Yeah, I think so. And I obviously the third chapter in the story here, and I think things are applicable here at this point. And let's not forget the questing quality of Jupiter. Wherever it's at, it's at 1 degree Aries at this point, retrograding back. It's about to hit the 28 and 29 degree of Pisces. We'll get to that in a second. But let's not forget the questing nature. What in the end, what Jupiter wants to do, yeah, anything it touches, it makes 10 times bigger, so on and so forth. But on a deeper level, there's a philosophical quest happening. And, when you get to put words to the quest, or you've been formulating the words to something like this, and this is how I can see this opposition happening at the third chapter here, is there's an art to all of this. There's an art to the quest. There's the raw initial power and will of Aries, and then you have the art of art that happens with Libra and Venus ruling Libra. But here's Mercury there, and could be the words that have culminated, the text, the cuneiform that's created, the cuneiform, the philosophical mantra, the text of something, of the code, of one's code, or what has come through this journey at the third chapter, and the code or this mantra of what it's been to go through this process of understanding and relating through the retrograde, through Libra birthdays, through Venus and Libra. Again, opposition can the word sounds a certain way, but at this point, after 3 of them, I like to take the view as an art piece was created, and maybe you can too.
Yeah. Well, and it's so let's think about our art piece that's being created, because we have a couple other things that are going in line at the same time that are going to play into a lot of what Nicholas and I were talking about earlier. So sandwiching between Mercury moving back into Libra and it meeting the opposition with Jupiter for the third time, that day in between on Tuesday of the 11th, we have an interesting combination of both the Sun trining Saturn and then Mars making its first official square to Neptune. On the same day, we have a Taurus moon lighting up the Saturn-Uranus conjunction. So talk about that third chapter, right? The third story. Yeah. There's an interesting lead up with Saturn, with Mars, with Neptune, with the stationing of Mercury or Mars retrograde that's about to happen, with Saturn about to emerge as well. Pluto's also going forward at this point. I feel like something goes down around this day, and then that's the chapter. Like we might see, because essentially Jupiter is under the rule of this Mars Neptune piece. So yeah, I feel like I feel like, I don't want to say blindsided, but there's something that develops that it starts a whole different sort of quest, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right here. It's one thing I'm talking about the art piece, but there's ways that the art piece can be manipulated or made. If I were to take one beginning angle, I'm looking at the construction and the palette of the mind, because of the Sun Saturn connection in air signs. So, we talked about a Mars Saturn thing earlier. And then we talk about how Saturn's going to be at this point and playing off and other things down the line with eclipses, so on and so forth. But I liked, if you want to use the art piece, the palette of the mind, this is one way I'm looking at it. I can look at it. But is there electricity and unpredictableness and things coming out of the blue? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. If you can flow with that and ride the lightning, that's a Metallica song.
Metallica. Oh yeah.
Yeah. If you can do that and you're comfortable with it, then I think it flows. But if you haven't been paying attention, every time the moon has been touching Uranus every month, maybe you need to look at your back history to see how you deal. But
yeah,
that's no joke. And that particular point right there with the Taurus stuff and what we're talking about, those are eclipse points in the end.
yes, that's true.
So, that can be heavy because we're dealing with major goodbyes and severing over a year and a half with the eclipses and stories with that here. So that it can go down that way. Now, to go back to what you asked me about the palette and an art piece, I still believe in it. I still believe in something like that if you're looking for a way to use it. And to be real with it, but it does it mean it's going to go the way you want it to the whole time? No, I just can't, not at what's happening with Uranus and the moon and all that stuff. So I for me,
Well,
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's interesting. And I want to play off your palette idea and the art
Yeah.
piece is that, because we had Mars meet Saturn. I thought it had a plan.
Mhm.
The
Yep.
sun comes along, you're like, sun's like, you know what? Guess what? We're seeing Saturn a little bit differently. And so Mars, you might need to make some concessions with the whole Neptune piece. And then of course, we're getting this eclipse precursor. But there's one thing, if you're an artist, for the most part, unless you're a very precise one that likes to lay things out exactly, when you start to create form in a work of art, you don't always know where that's going to take you.
Yeah.
You like start to make something and then you thought it was going to be this, but all of a sudden then you start looking at it a little bit differently. And now you see a form that wasn't there before. So then you start to draw in this direction because the form is morphing. Right. And I mean, I feel like this is very Mars Neptune. There's a morphingness because now we see the light or we see the form, or we see the shape in a different way, in a different aesthetic, with a different balance. It's not leaning left anymore. Now it's leaning right. And so there's something here that seems very, it doesn't seem as shocking and forceful. It's changed, but it almost has, because there's trines and squares, it has this kind of organic nature, if that makes any sense at all.
Can you flow with that? Can you
to that? Yeah.
Yeah. And once you start on your piece and the creativeness, can you recognize the moment of not trying to control it all and have actually the mystery of what you're creating lead you somewhere else and to go with the flow? So you need structure. Obviously, you start off, but then you have to almost let yourself be taken away, as in all ritual, actually. As in, if we were talking about art piece, but let's just say what it really is in the end. Life is a ritual, and we have these things that we do and how we do it. And it's how we learn each time we do a ritual, what happens. And so in this particular case, by the way, because I know you're so multifaceted, Melissa, in your life as a creative person. So I know this, you speak your truth. So I think the way you're coming across is so on point, and that there's still something that's here to be done, but at the same time, you have to manage something free flowing and something possibly caustic at the same time.
100%. Like that's, well, and okay, leads us exactly where we're going with it, right? Because Venus, she's sweating just that much more. She's getting real close to the sun, and she is mimicking all the sun's moves. So let's go back to the idea I think we started with when we were talking about Venus and receptivity, right? Here's the sun makes us very aware of something with the Saturn piece, and now Venus is coming up to trine Saturn on just 2 days later on the 13th on Thursday, as we go after we go through this point, you know. But now we got the moon in Gemini, so there is going to be this kind of flowing energy, air energy with this Venus Sun piece. So I feel like so it's interesting because I want to give kind of a bigger picture to what's going on here, because I feel like Venus is going to help flow. You know, we're going to have different ideas. We're going to have different possibilities that start to form. It's all in relation to Saturn, but you know, there's potential there. But it leads us into tricky territory because as time goes on, and we have a last quarter moon in Cancer. I'm just going to give like a bigger picture here. We have a last quarter moon in Cancer. The sun is going to square Pluto, and then Venus is going to follow up. So let's go back to our Venus trine. Let's go back to our Venus trine Saturn.
Let's just make that memory. Remember this trine.
Let's just make that trine, you know, that air trine, grand air trine is flowing with the moon, Saturn, and Venus and the sun. But we're leading into sculpting, change, transition, big questions, big shifts that come immediately after that. So, I mean, I think that's the next thing that happens, right? Yeah. Okay. So the sun trines Mars at that point, because, you know, we're getting these air trines that are happening. So Venus, Saturn, the moon, the sun, they're all flowing. Sun, that moon, Mars, sun is going to flow. We have a flow. We have this airflow.
Yep. And
but all of a sudden,
yeah, go ahead.
No, all of a sudden, I'm just going to say all of a sudden, but go on with your thought.
Oh, I just wanted to say something here because we have something interesting happening in general because of Mars being in Gemini, that you pay attention to every time the moon is in Gemini every month and what happens, because I just know this happened last week. I heard a lot of stories. I did this, I did that, and I was running I was in traffic, and my emails were coming through, and blah 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 blah. You know, just to say that from an air point of view, and you got air planets, it could flow for you. You can actually get a lot of stuff done with transits like this. But just in general, Moon Mars is going to be happening for 7 straight months now. And that in a sense, you should just mark it on your calendar and see what happens to you in the Gemini part of your chart. Just because it's a rare deal. Anyway, so
no, I think that's a great point to you know, because we do want to pay attention to this, because as we pay attention to this, right? I mean, this moon Mars action on the 14th, Friday, that's the last conjunction of moon Mars before Mars goes retrograde.
Yep.
So once again, we're talking about precursor, and there's a lot of precursor, but it's a precursor flow with Venus, Sun in Libra, Saturn in Aquarius, and then the moon Mars in Gemini. So there's a lot of activity. You know, there's a lot of activity that takes place this week. Maybe some things happen on Tuesday, the tides shift, and now we're just in this flow. We're going with it. Tons of correspondence is coming in. Don't check your text while you're driving.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Because sometimes with flows, everything happens so fast that, you know, you're like, this happened, you know, like.
Yeah. And there's some of us that normally handle something like this, because I have grand air trine in my chart in general, but like you can handle it. But actually something like this some people are not used to it. And things do build up in the week, and there's the weekend. And I think even on a social media angle, internet angle, there's a lot that can happen here.
Yeah.
Just the amount of information being put out there and what's exchanged, or what in the 24 hours becomes popular just for 24 hours, how it could take something over and how people are communicating about it. Just can happen in that way. This is how it works with air planets and stuff. So
exactly. I feel like if there's a viral moment,
yep, there it is.
Here it is, you know, this week in general. So So let's keep that in mind. We get through this Gemini moon phase that's lighting all this up. I mean, I think it will be interesting for just working out with relationships just as a whole, right? The sun is trining the Mars component and Venus is trining Saturn. So we have our eclipse planets at play. We have our relationships planets at play.
Mm-hmm.
So there can be definitely changing turning points there, and also talking points, where there's a lot of ideas or correspondence in the sky. But then we have our last quarter moon. So we kind of get through, I think I have the wrong date on that. Or maybe I don't. No, I think I do. Yeah. Oh no. Sorry. My notes, you're always going to have
No, it's
something with
okay. I'm looking at them
Mercury
too. So
retrograde.
yeah.
But it looks like it's like Sunday, Monday. So we're going to have this last quarter moon, actually Monday, in Cancer, which is always interesting, right? We're having this another cardinal turning point. We're pushing to like maybe a finish or a turning point that has to do with home, family, foundation. If anybody's like moving right now or like sorting out like kind of foundational aspects with Cancerian placements, nurturing, having a moment with yourself of like what's nourishing and nurturing in your life and how that's changing. Because we're getting that last quarter moon on Monday is going to bring us into this Sun Pluto square, essentially, which Venus will follow suit when they both square on the 19th there. So like the 17th and the 18th and the 19th, that leads us in with the last quarter in Cancer. We're in this Pluto territory where all of a sudden that party of the air now is like, whoa, how does this work
Yeah.
in the earth? How does it work in the earth? How do I feel about it? How is this? Oh, okay. This is getting real.
Yep. The intensity it's building up, Venus, Pluto. I cannot help but think about the beginning of this year when I look at this, because of what happened when the Venus retrograde in Capricorn and the
Yeah.
points that it made and the aspects it made from Christmas last year, what happened January, February, and there was multiple Venus Pluto aspects that happened, and in a sense, a deeper story here, because now you have not just the sun, but Venus coming to this place.
Yeah.
And I don't
She's
want to,
rounding the bend on what she started there.
yep. And it's hitting the points during that retrograde and certain things that happen. And remember, what eventually happened was Venus and Mars were together in the sky in Capricorn and then still stayed together. Venus overlapped and then went into Aquarius. Oh, that's a whole nother thing. But I don't want to forget what happened at the beginning of this year. How we started was a major Venus Pluto story.
Yeah.
And here we are, and yeah, we've had the sociableness of the air signs and the flow and the constructing and all that. But whenever Pluto's involved in the end, and let's say from the squaring or the oppositional angle, but the squaring in this case, the sun and Venus, now you have major power play involved in relating.
Yeah.
And control, power, coming to a head with certain relational items, situations.
Well, it's like it's all well and good when you're just talking about it and you're detached from it and it's just a concept or a story or an idea. But add the actual what has to change within it, or what deeper emotions have to be felt, or just being in the thick of it. So it's like that's kind of why it's like it gets real in the sense that,
Yeah.
and in I love that you pointed out the previous journey with Venus and Pluto there, because once again, let's go back to the chapters. Like this
Yeah.
is not a new news. This is going to be a turning point in that larger story that her previous retrograde was birthed in. And so let's think about that, because what are we leading to right after this
Mm-hmm.
is the Venus, she's hot now. She is sweating. She needs some sunblock. Because on Friday, or no, actually it's on, this whole week she's getting so close, but on Saturday, the 22nd, I believe it's on the 22nd, right? Yeah. she makes her conjunction with the sun, which is a big turning point within relation to her retrograde cycle that makes the inferior conjunction to the sun,
Yep.
right? So she goes retrograde on this Pluto piece, and then right before she's going to make her superior conjunction with the sun, she's like taps into this where she started with it all, you know?
Yeah, it's like an underworld story again.
Yeah.
And like Pluto starts it off like the leading down into, or the reminder of, depending on what stories you like to use with the underworld story, whether you're using Anana or you're using Kali Ma or the numerous ones out there, Hades, Persephone, whatever you're using, understanding there is another closing out, I would say, and another version of what a metaphorical ending or death is. That's how I look at things like this with Pluto, Venus, but in general with Venus, Sun, especially with Venus's cycle. What happens? What is it? 16 months. You have the 2 months where she disappears here with the sun, and then there's the 7 months evening or 7 months morning, or a morning star. Whatever the case is here, you have a moment of letting go, and the purification process that comes with the conjunction with the sun. There's a lot of people in the astrology world. I think it's been actually in the last 20 plus years that this is becoming a major thing to be talked about in the astrology world. And I'm happy for it, because I think when you track Venus and with the type of Venus that you have in the chart and what phase that it's in and so on and so forth, you can go really deep with this stuff. But I think it's very tangible and can be used in one's world and ritualized. So this ritual of Venus meeting the sun, if you all out there listening, think of it as a purification process and the shedding of what needs to go. And it's, by the way, sacred and natural. It's been happening since this world has been turning. It's super effing precise what Venus does in the sky. All sacred geometry, everything you want to talk about this stuff. I'm not the authority on the Venus story like other astrologers we know are, but as a Venus ruled person, I have come to not only appreciate moments like this, but to let myself go into the story. Remember, you all are the story. It's not separate. The reason why we chase story and myth, it's because it's the closest thing we have to understanding ourselves, and it always will be. So you want to take a story on of shedding your skin, or let's say you got placements around 29 degrees cardinal or something like that, or whatever, do it. It's yours. It's yours to do that with. It's yours to let go. It's yours to say goodbye, and to be part of something like that, and part of a ritual, and to be not just in control, but to let yourself go into it. And still be alive, but still be able to die, I guess,
just be a little stripped.
Yeah, pretty much. So, I don't, anyway.
I love that, because it's an important piece, and it's such an interesting lead up to it with the square to Pluto and the sun and Venus both having trined Mars right before, and we're in this big relationship territory. And I mean, look at the moon there in Virgo. Like, we're getting very close to a solar eclipse. Like, it's not like this happens and it's not, and then we're just going about another day. Like, this is a balsamic dark phase of the moon, getting ready to be eclipsed. It's in a, you hear Shu talk about in the last episode about, this actually taking place in a Venus star point that's not activated, the 29 degrees of Libra. So that's a whole shift too. The 29 degrees of Libra was where the Aries the Aries ingress moon was for the whole world. So there's an interesting turning point here too, with the sun and Venus conjuncting there as well. And it's just, it's a fascinating time. And the irony, I'm going to be at a wedding that day in Gainesville, Georgia.
Really?
People that have nothing to do with astrology picked this day,
obviously,
to be wed.
Yeah.
And I think, Nicholas, we forgot to say, because we're so carried away by the Sun Venus component, is Saturn is stationing direct on this day as well. So it's big. This is a big weekend. It's a big
Yeah.
shift. It's leading us into another big shift. And I'm going to be on vacation. So,
Well, I know you'll make the best of the vacation. I also know that many of us have been waiting for Saturn to station to move forward here. And this is the last time that Saturn,
yeah.
in a sense, does part of a retrograde story, because it finally moves. And then when we get to spring, it's going to leave Aquarius finally and go into Pisces. There isn't going to be any more Saturn Aquarius retrogrades. So for those who are keeping track of this, this is a moment you can actually, like, in a Saturnian way, celebrate, if it's some low-key celebration. I'm going to. But again, at the same time, with an anaretic degree, 29-degree Venus Sun cazimi, and what that means, there is an ending. There is just an end of something big here. And if we were to concentrate and think about a lot of what we've been talking about here, about Venus and Libra and this month, and and you just can't help it when you say all those words together, go into relationships. Does it mean that your relationships are ending? Maybe. Does it mean, if you're a Libra, that you have a relationship ending? No, not really. But I think you have to find where the ending is and how it's playing out in your life. You can also look to the Libra part of your chart, for it's, and remember, when I say ending, there's another word that is along with that, and it's beginning.
Yeah.
And to know that that's part of it. It's not just ending and that you're done, it's beginning. So it could be the most subtlest of shifting that happens, or it's dramatic and very obvious. But whatever the case is, accept and let yourself go into that ending beginning process. So just to harp on that again.
Yeah. No, I think it's right on, because it's like when you were talking about like the myths that you attach yourself with like the underworld, or the idea of, well, for me, and I was talking about this in the Venus retrograde episode that I did, it's like one of the kind of like underworld myths that I associate with relating. And I think this goes into what we were just saying, is the skeleton woman, and the idea of death. Love is experienced in death, birth, death. It's like the secret to any long-term relationship, and the long-term relationship you have with yourself, because we're all in partnership with ourselves every day, from day one to the last. Is we go through these cycles of death, birth, and you have to let love die. It has to be reborn.
Yeah.
It has to go through these potholes, because when it comes back up, it's that much stronger. It's purified. It has been because love is an indomitable force, right? It wants to come up. It wants to birth. It's like the flower that just wants to push up and be like, look how glorious I am. But I have to go through this cycle. And so I feel like this is part of this transitionary space, is this death, birth, like the skeleton woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's beautiful, and to play upon, I love what you said about the Saturn piece. So just to say something real quick about my own life that really plays into it, like Saturn in Aquarius is stationing direct on my IC. I've been looking for a place to go to relocate for quite some time. And part of my trip is actually, we're going to go to a town right after that wedding. We're going to go stay in an Airbnb in this other town to go check it out, because it was on my list. So literally I'm going to like look at this place that could be a potential the day after Saturn stations direct on my IC and is ready to complete this. So, who knows? We don't know how it'll turn out, but it's part of the storyline, right? We're getting back to
Definitely.
the
Yep.
storyline.
Yeah. And
So,
I hoped that whatever happens to you in that situation, that you find something, because it's there, and
yeah.
astrology works. Whether you planned it to be there, you elected the timer to do or whatever or not, it works. You know, to be and know that you're part of a sacred system, and first and foremost, when you let yourself go into that, how empowering it is and how beautiful it is. To go to what you said earlier about what love is. You know, we all find our lessons in that story, and it takes a tremendous amount of courage and faith to let go into something that is potentially quote unquote dying or dead, so the cycle keeps going, like you said with love and the story that you're mentioning. But it takes courage to do that. It takes like a leap of faith, and it's a risk and a gamble. And it's sometimes part of a funny story that happens in the underworld story, whatever you choose when it's happening, because there at that part of the underworld, it's illusionary in a sense. At that peaking point, it's like you want to hold on to something and not let it go, because it actually brought you so much power. It actually did good in your life. But nothing ever lasts. And can you recognize the moment of letting go of the thing that got you, that brought you so much? Because even that becomes poisonous. Even that rots and needs to fade away. And so can you find the courage, and at that moment, can you completely surrender and completely let go to the process? And you know, and that's a thing. But again, you can, and it takes the ultimate faith, you know, but you do it. There's, I think, the love is deeper for you, first and foremost for yourselves. And if you happen to be in a relationship that's new or one that's ongoing, that got through the transformation, you can look in each other's eyes and say, man, we did that shit, you know, like, you know, I see you differently than I've ever seen you before, and I got your back and you got my back. It can play out that way, or it's just with yourself and the world and how you just see the world with new eyes. But does it anyway? Not to keep going on that, but I just wanted to mirror back to you about your story of Skeleton Key and love, and then, you know, the what happens along the way in a story like this with Pluto Venus and then Sun Venus. You're exposed anyway. You're going to be exposed and purified.
As we end the season with Venus moving into Scorpio,
yes,
to be eclipsed on a solar eclipse with the moon. You know, you could have ended it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm like ranting, but it's funny because if you your transit calendar that you have, or the chart you have, or I think even if you go 1 hour whenever, it goes 0-0.
Yeah,
it goes.
Yeah. There it is.
There it is. Yeah.
There it is, and it essentially leads us to that a few days later.
Good times.
Yeah. No. It is right. You know, it makes life worth living.
Yeah.
Never bored. So I'm going to pose the hardest question in the world to anybody, especially with Gemini planets. Nicholas, if you had one word to describe Libra season, what would it be?
Mirror.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the word mirror to me. After all this talking, I had another word, by the way, before we started. But I'm gonna say mirror. And so you look in the mirror, one looks in the mirror, you look at other people and they mirror you. And what happens in that process, and what is reciprocated or not reciprocated, what is communicated, not communicated, there's something going on. It's you and everything else in you. And so I pick mirror.
No, I think that's a great one. I mean, that's where Libra lives. That's where that 7th house energy lives. That's where Venus, like it's like, and we live in a world of projections. We talked about this with Gemini energy too, and Mars being there and the twin. Like, I think
Yeah.
mirror is a big, big thing right now. Like, what do you see in the mirror? What do you see when you look at yourself in the mirror? What do you see
Yeah.
when you see the mirror of your loved one, or the mirror of the stranger, and what you're taking in from that example? It's like
Hmm.
everything, there's mirrors all around,
Yeah.
and the mirror
Yeah.
teaches us about ourselves.
Yep. I think that's what happens on this planet in the end. It's the quest and how things are come back to you and what you do with it. So,
You just made me think about, I'm like, what if we were just living in a big fun house? Like,
yeah.
what if the house of mirrors, and that's what we see. That's
Yeah,
what we see.
there's a
Woo!
famous scene. There's a famous scene in a movie that Bruce Lee made called Enter the Dragon.
Mm.
And he in the beginning of the movie, his mentor talks about you must smash the illusion. Okay. And so at the end of the movie, the bad guy, there's a very famous scene where it's all mirrors and the bad guy is they're fighting, but he can't see where he's at. And then there's a moment that Bruce Lee, the character, he has this moment and he hears the voice from the beginning of the movie. He's meant to remember. I don't know exactly, but to smash the illusions. So what he ends up doing is smashing the mirrors around him to get to the real guy. And that is the whole basic tone of the movie and the lesson. So, I'm bringing up mirror. Do you smash the mirror? Maybe you do. I don't know, but still in the end, it's like we have the things that are reflected back towards us, and then we take it in and we try to sift through what is real and who we are, and to eventually find that pure place, that purity of the essence of who we are. So, but it always starts with something outside of us.
All I could think of as you were sharing that example was Mars square Neptune.
Yeah, actually, that's what that is.
That's
Yeah,
exactly what
that's
that is.
exactly what it is.
That is you kind of like summed it up in a better, like, that is exactly what it is. And as we get to the height of political season, eclipse is coming, like, smash the mirrors, get
Yeah.
smash the illusion.
Yep.
I love that. That's great. That's great. That's a great way. I'm trying to think of a word, but I don't even know if I have one. I just really like that analogy. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Um,
it's it's hard. Ooh.
gonna be
Oh,
all right
geez.
though. We're
It
gonna be all
is.
right.
It
We're gonna be
is.
all right, because that's why you do something like this. You and I are talking as astrologers. We all have our different modalities. We communicate. Other people are listening. We're just trying to figure it out. We're just trying to do the best that we can. But so it's all right to say like, hey, we're gonna do this. We're on that quest, and maybe and to remember too that you can have fun on the quest too.
That's right.
So
That's right. It's like, find the fun. I mean, it is Venus season, right?
yeah,
She
for sure.
likes to play. She likes a little pleasure. She's like,
Yeah.
don't forget about that. So maybe I'll use that word, pleasure.
That's
Find where
actually
pleasure fits in.
yeah.
Like, why you're smashing the illusions, why you're looking in the mirror, like, don't take yourself too seriously. Don't take life too seriously, because that's a recipe for
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yeah, you could
For
take no, but no, it's good that you picked that word actually, to take pleasure in it actually, and to find the juice of it all, and you don't want to forget that that's part of life. When you live if you push things to the edge, or you're pushing your heart and mind and everything to a place that there is a rush of life there. You're alive. And it's okay to go, you know what, I'm alive, I'm take this, there's pleasure in that too, and hell, if you could do it with somebody else.
Why not? Why
Yeah.
not? Oh my
Yeah.
God, I love it. All right, Nicholas. I think we did a
Ooh,
bang up job. We went long.
yeah.
Can you tell we have a Gemini planets conjunct? Um
Yeah, I was just
yeah.
thinking, where's your Mercury?
Yeah. In Leo conjunct Jupiter.
Oh, that's
But
right.
I think my Mars is on your your Mercury.
That's right, your Mars.
Yeah. So that being said, Nicholas, where can people find you? What do you got going on? What do you got to share?
People can find me on my website, first and foremost, sparklesofgold.com. I'm on YouTube at Sparkles of Gold Astrology, on IG, Pinterest. I've taken a break from social and going right back in this week. You can find me at those platforms. I'll be doing videos. I'll be publishing some interviews with astrologers that I've done at NORWAC and the ESAR conferences, where I ask them 3 questions. And so on and so forth. But you can find me there, newsletter, so on and so forth. I even have a Patreon, hands everywhere, but sparklesofgold.com. Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, you're going to have to go visit Nicholas. And of course, I will share his information over at on a blog post at my site on energeticprinciples.com. You could also find me at Energetic Principles on Instagram, which I haven't been on very much. I'm taking a social respite because it just feels right. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that can help fill the gap right now, but hopefully you're getting value out of the podcast and all that we share here. But you might catch me there, you might not, but follow me just in case, because who knows. What else is going on? Actually, there's not a lot right now. I'm kind of getting ready for this vacation. I'm just living Mel's best life. And yeah, so if you think people need to hear about Libra season and all that we talked about here, sharing is caring, spread the good word, share the podcast and the YouTube link, etc., etc. You can also leave a review wherever you listen to this program, hopefully a favorable one. Also, I will say I do have my newsletter, The Heavenly Wind, that will go out on October 1st. So if you want to sign up for that, you can do so on my webpage as well. I think that's it. Nicholas, such a pleasure to
thanks for having me
chat
on
with you.
Yeah, it's good. I'm glad we connected. Thanks for reaching out and for having me on the podcast. I think we did right. So yeah.
We did it right. We did it.
Yeah.
Justice.
Yeah. 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 And let's actually end in this way, actually, because you have something around your neck.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And it's for pure Venus moment here, pure harmonization, pure love is happening right now.
That's right. Feel the Venus in our talisman group. We're sending it out to you. And we wish it for all of you out there. And we wish you the best as we lead up into this eclipse season. It's going to be a doozy in the best way possible. All right, everyone. Take care out there. And as always, may the stars be with you.